Chapter 1650. The members of the Moonfox clan were cheering and praying to the temple, deeply grateful for its help. The simple people danced and sang excitedly. They were discussing how to hold a grand banquet to celebrate this joyous occasion. The Silver Moon Priest saw this, and was so heartbroken that she could not speak. She said a few perfunctory words to the people, and hurriedly left the temple. Ji Tianxing and Jiao took the opportunity to leave the moon-summoning mountain quietly. The two of them rode on the Pegasus, and flew across the sky as fast as lightning, returning to Taihao City. On the way back, Jiao kept looking at Ji Tianxing with a strange expression, and snickered from time to time. Ji Tianxing sat upright on the back of the Pegasus. He originally wanted to maintain a straight face, and maintain a serious appearance. But after Jiao glanced at him a few more times, he could not hold it in anymore. Jiao, why do you keep looking at me? Is there something on my face? Jiao covered her mouth and snickered again. There was a cunning look in her big bright eyes. I'm thinking, are you still the Tianxing I know? What do you mean? Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows. Jiao counted with her fingers and said, I'm thinking, what made an honest, kind and principled young genius become a cunning and scheming villain? I don't know what you're talking about. Ji Tianxing shook his head and looked away. Jiao turned around and stared into his eyes. She smiled and said, Actually, you didn't know the relationship between Qianyu and the Moonfox tribe at first. And you weren't sure if Qianyu was the descendant of the Moonfox tribe's ancestor. You saw that the divine stone of the moon was extraordinary, and contained powerful divine power. It was very beneficial to Qianyu, so you deliberately made up a lie. You retreated in order to advance, and deliberately said that you wanted to keep Qianyu in the Moonfox tribe. When the Silver Moon Priest agreed, you deliberately threatened her, and forced her to give up the divine stone of the moon, and let you and Qianyu go. Humph, the Moonfox tribe is simple and kind. They are not good at scheming. You can fool them, but you can't fool me. The Silver Moon Priest was shocked by the series of events, and his mind was unstable. That was why he fell into your trap. When she wakes up, she'll definitely settle the score with you. After hearing Jiao's words, Ji Tianxing had no choice but to face reality. He smiled awkwardly and said, All right, I can't hide anything from you. You are really smart. However, by the time the Silver Moon Priestess comes looking for me, I will already be long gone from God's kingdom. Where can she find me? Jiao pouted and said worriedly, If the Silver Moon Priestess can't find you, she will definitely go to the 100 Tribes Alliance to ask for an explanation. At that time, this matter will alarm God Father. If Father God knows that I brought you to the Moonfox clan, and caused this matter, he will definitely punish me, and forbid me to go to the Moonfox clan again. Ji Tianxing revealed an apologetic look and comforted her. I'm really sorry about this matter, but you are the Divine Lord's most beloved little princess. He won't be too harsh on you. Jiao was still a little unhappy. She pouted and said, But I can't go to the Moonfox clan to taste the moon scar pastries anymore. That's simple. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and said seriously, In the future, when I travel the world, if I come across any delicious food, I will bring back 100 servings as compensation. Yes, that's a good idea. Jiao smiled and nodded. Tianxing, you promised me. You can't go back on your words. Don't worry, I won't lie to you. Ji Tianxing smiled and patted her head gently. Jiao pouted and said unhappily, Humph, don't touch my head. Do you think I'm a child? I'm much older than you. All right. Ji Tianxing nodded and couldn't help but reach out and touch her head a few more times. Jiao stared at him speechlessly and pouted, pretending to be angry. Ji Tianxing smiled even more happily. 2 hours later, the Pegasus returned to Taihao City and landed in Rui Palace. Ji Tianxing returned to his residence and entered a secret chamber to meditate. As he meditated, he released his consciousness from time to time to check on Qianyu's situation. Qianyu had been sleeping in peaceful Soil City in the Sword World. The size of the divine moon stone had shrunk slightly, but it still emitted a mysterious silver light and fluctuated with powerful divine power. Qianyu's bloodline and soul had fused with the divine stone's power and were rapidly strengthening. Ji Tianxing could vaguely sense that Qianyu would soon break through to the primordial spirit realm, and the divine power contained in the divine moon stone would allow it to reach the 6th level of the primordial spirit realm, or even higher. That divine moon stone contains terrifying divine power. Other spiritual beasts and human warriors can't devour and refine it, but Qianyu can refine it. However, Qianyu was able to refine it without a hitch. The energy fluctuations and attributes of the summoning moon divine stone were perfectly compatible with it. From the looks of it, I didn't lie to the Silver Moon Priest. Qianyu really has the bloodline of the Moon Fox clan's ancestor. Originally, he had planned to ask the Silver Moon Priest about the Moon Fox clan's ancestor. But the Silver Moon Priest was in a terrible mood, and he didn't want to embarrass himself, so he left quietly. Now that he had nothing to do, he drove his primordial spirit into Qinshin's tomb and entered the Heavenly Sutra Chamber through the first tombstone. He browsed through the books in the Heavenly Sutra Chamber, looking for information related to the Moon Fox clan. Hard work pays off. He spent half a day searching through thousands of ancient books, and finally found a book related to the Moon Fox clan. This ancient book mentioned the Moon Fox clan, but it was only a brief introduction of about 1,000 words. According to the book, the Moon Fox clan was one of the ancient clans. They had once prospered and established a huge empire. A portion of the Moon Fox clan's bloodline originated from the ancient divine beast, the Sky Fox. Therefore, the Moon Fox clan viewed the Sky Fox as their ancestor and worshipped it devoutly. The Sky Fox had always protected the Moon Fox clan and taught them many martial arts and spells. That was why the Moon Fox clan prospered. However, in the ancient war that happened 30,000 years ago, the Sky Fox clan participated in the war and fell one after another. The Moon Fox clan also followed their ancestor to participate in the ancient war. In the end, they suffered a crushing defeat and were almost exterminated. In the tens of thousands of years after that, the Sky Fox clan's bloodline gradually withered, and it was difficult to pass down the bloodline of the Sky Fox clan. The Moon Fox clan also became weaker and was bullied and ostracized by other clans. They had no choice but to move from place to place. More than 1,000 years ago, the Sky Fox clan completely disappeared. The Moon Fox clan lost their last hope, and their situation became even more miserable and helpless. They encountered danger several times and were almost exterminated. Fortunately, martial god Taihao was merciful and saved the Moon Fox clan. He settled them in the Heavenly Kingdom and allowed the Moon Fox clan to survive. When Ji Tianxing finished reading the contents of the book, he understood the whole story, but a question popped up in his mind, and he couldn't get rid of it. Since the Sky Fox clan disappeared more than 1,000 years ago, why did it disappear without a trace? Then why did it appear 100 years ago? And why did it appear in the Tianxian continent? Chapter 1651. Ji Tianxing could not figure out the Heavenly Fox clan for the time being, so he had to put it aside for the time being. He calmed down and cultivated, silently improving his strength. Now that he had reached the peak of the 7th level of the Essence Soul Realm, he could reach the 8th level of the Essence Soul Realm, as long as he broke through the bottleneck. He wanted to use the majestic spiritual energy and divine power of the Divine Kingdom to break through the bottleneck of the realm. However, the Essence Soul Realm was already an unfathomable realm of martial arts. How difficult was it to break through the bottleneck? Ji Tianxing cultivated in seclusion in the secret chamber for 6 consecutive days, but he still could not break through the bottleneck. These 6 days of cultivation only deepened his cultivation and strengthened his martial arts foundation. Other than that, he did not gain anything. Until the morning of the 7th day, a guard came to the secret chamber and knocked on the door. Ji Tianxing had no choice but to end his cultivation and get up to walk out of the secret chamber. He saw 2 people standing at the door of the secret chamber. One of them was the guard, and the other was Jiujio. Jiujio was wearing a light green dress and exquisite hair accessories on her head. She looked exceptionally cute. However, her expression and eyes were not relaxed at all. There was even a hint of worry. "Jiujio, why are you looking for me?" Ji Tianxing greeted her. Jiujio hurriedly pulled him out and explained as they walked. "Tianxing, The Silver Moon Priestess has indeed come to Taihao City. She is now in the 100 Clan Alliance looking for someone to judge. I just got the news, so I hurried to inform you. Before the people of the 100 Races Alliance begin their investigation, you should hide first." Then she added, "Of course, this is not because I am afraid of trouble. I just don't want to get involved in unnecessary trouble. Furthermore, the Heavenly Fox clan is so pure and kind. I don't want to hurt the Silver Moon Priestess." Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood. "Yes, I have already planned and mentally prepared for this. Since the Silver Moon Priestess is here, it is time for me to leave." Seeing that he had no intention of resisting, Jiao heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Tianxing, go pack up. I will wait for you here." Ji Tianxing shook his head and said with a smile, "I don't have anything to pack. I can set off now." "All right, then I'll send you to the space-time tunnel now." Jiao ordered the guards to prepare a carriage. When the two of them walked into the courtyard, an exquisite and luxurious large carriage had already stopped in front of them. This carriage was Jiao's personal carriage. It was incomparably luxurious and noble. It was pulled by 4 spotlessly white Pegasi. The coachman was the captain of the imperial bodyguards. After Ji Tianxing and Jiao boarded the carriage, the coachman drove the carriage away from Rui Palace and headed towards the eastern district. About half an hour later, the carriage passed through a dozen streets and stopped in front of a majestic tower. This white pagoda, which was 100 feet tall, was one of the few iconic buildings in the city. It was called the Space-Time Pagoda. The area within 1,000 feet of the Tower of Time and Space was a restricted area guarded by hundreds of temple guards. Ordinary people were not allowed to approach. This place was heavily guarded, and the giant tower exuded a sacred and majestic aura. Ji Tianxing could vaguely feel that there was an extremely powerful array set up inside the Space-Time Pagoda. It exuded waves of invisible divine power. After Jiao showed the token to the commander of the Imperial Bodyguards, she brought Ji Tianxing into the Space-Time Pagoda. The two of them climbed up the winding stone stairs. After about half an hour, they arrived at the top floor. The top floor was a vast hall. The floor was paved with rare jade and inlaid with all kinds of gems and divine stones. In the middle of the hall, there was an ancient altar with a radius of more than 300 feet. The altar flickered with a dense white light and exuded a majestic divine power fluctuation. 4 white-robed elders with sage-like demeanor guarded the altar. They were meditating with their eyes closed. Jiao pointed at the altar and introduced it to Ji Tianxing. "Tianxing, that is the altar to travel through space-time. In a while, I will let the 4 emissaries open the altar to open the space-time tunnel. Once you pass through the space-time tunnel, you will be able to travel billions of miles in an instant and reach the ruins of God. However, you must remember that after you reach the ruins of God, you must be careful. You must not be reckless. You must find a safe place to stay and wait for the people from Mount God Bestowment to arrive. Then you can meet them." Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood. Jiao was relieved and went to negotiate with the 4 white-robed emissaries. A moment later, the 4 white-robed emissaries followed her orders and joined forces to open the altar's array. Suddenly, the ancient altar began to operate and lit up with a dazzling golden light. The sacred golden light exuded a terrifying divine power fluctuation and gathered at the top of the altar. It gradually condensed into a 3-meter-tall golden light door. The style of the light door was simple and sacred. Behind the door was pitch black and incomparably mysterious. Ji Tianxing saw that the space-time tunnel had been opened and bowed to Jiao. "Jiao, then I will take my leave. We will meet again if fate wills it." Jiao was stunned. She frowned and asked, "Tianxing, are you really not planning to come back? Then what you promised me before, does it still count?" Ji Tianxing reached out and patted her head. He smiled and said, "The road ahead is long. Everything is unknown. Perhaps I will come back one day. No matter what, I will not forget what I promised you. I will definitely do it." Jiao's mood became even more depressed. She pouted and said, "If you go back on your words, I will never trust you again." Ji Tianxing did not say anything. He just smiled and waved at her. Then he stepped into the space-time light door. Swoosh, In the next moment, the space-time light door flashed with golden light. Ji Tianxing's figure disappeared. The four white-robed emissaries gradually stopped, and the space-time light door gradually dissipated. Jiujio stood in place and stared blankly at the space-time light door dissipating. After a long time, she turned and left. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing only saw a flash of light in front of his eyes. He left the boundless darkness and came to an unfamiliar place. He appeared on a 10,000 feet tall mountain. He stood on a huge black rock at the peak of the mountain. A biting cold wind blew in his face, causing his clothes to flutter and his long hair to dance wildly. He looked around calmly and observed the terrain of this area. He saw that the sky was gloomy and filled with endless leaden clouds. There was also a whistling cold wind that wreaked havoc. There was not a trace of green on the bare mountain peak. Not even a small tree or grass could be seen. There was only grayish-brown soil and bare rocks everywhere. The entire mountain under his feet was a withered gray. It was as if there was a dead aura around it. Around the mountain, there were 10,000 feet deep ancient valleys, long and narrow ravines, and undulating mountain ranges. However, there was no green forest or vegetation within a radius of a few hundred miles. Heaven and earth were filled with a thick chill. There was also an ancient and heavy aura. Chapter 1652. Before coming to the ruins of God, Ji Tianxing had done an investigation and understood the situation of the ruins of God. The ruins of God had existed since the ancient times. However, in the first 10 or 20,000 years, this area had been covered by fog. No one could find this place, and almost no one could enter the ruins of God to see its true appearance. About 8,000 years ago, news of the ruins of God began to spread on the continent. Many martial arts experts heard the news of the ruins of God and rushed in. Some wanted to pay homage to the ruins of the ancient gods, while others wanted to obtain the inheritance or treasures of the ancient gods. In short, for a long time, the ruins of God was known as the most mysterious treasure land on the continent, attracting experts of various races to explore. Although a few lucky people successfully entered the ruins of God and obtained great gains and surprises, most of the people lost. However, most of them were lost in the ruins of God. They either died under the claws of the ferocious beasts or mysteriously disappeared. 5,000 years ago, the three divine kingdoms were established and began to intervene. The three divine kingdoms discussed and decided to join forces to explore the ruins of God in order to obtain the inheritance and treasures of the ancient gods. However, the mysterious guardian of the ruins of God appeared. He was the old man of the ruins of God. Whether the experts of the three divine kingdoms joined forces, or the divine lords personally took action, they could not do anything to him. With the old man of the ruins of God, no one could force their way into the ruins of God, not even the martial gods. The old man of the ruins of God was as mysterious as the ruins of God. No one knew where he came from, no one knew his strength, and no one knew why he wanted to protect the ruins of God. People only knew that after the old man of the ruins of God discussed with the three divine lords, they made a decision. Every 20 years or so, the three divine kingdoms would select the most outstanding geniuses to exchange pointers in the ruins of God. If anyone had outstanding talent, or could catch the eye of the old man of the ruins of God, he would give them a chance to enter the ruins of God. This rule came from this, and had lasted for more than 5,000 years. Ji Tianxing stood on the bare mountain peak, and looked at the gray sky in front of him. He murmured with a calm expression. Jiujio said before that the Divine Kingdom exchange would be held on the ancient gazing platform. But the ruins of God is incomparably vast, at least 10 million miles. Where is the ancient gazing platform? With this thought, he took out a communication jade slip and sent a message to the Great Guardian, asking for his location and the location of the ancient gazing platform. About a quarter of an hour later, a spiritual light flew from the horizon and landed in his hand. This spiritual light was the jade slip that the Great Guardian had sent back. Ji Tianxing released his divine sense and invaded it, immediately reading the information. It turned out that the Great Guardian had personally brought the four gods' disciples here, and they were already on their way. It would take them about 12 days to reach the ruins of God. As for the location of the ancient gazing platform, the Great Protector did not know where Ji Tianqing was, and could not provide him with directions and routes. The Great Guardian only told him that the ancient viewing platform was located in the depths of the ruins of God, close to the center. Ji Tianqing silently put away the jade slip and opened the sword world. His divine sense extended into the city lord's manor of peaceful Soil City. In a dimly lit secret room, there were 2 futons made of spiritual jade, and a wide bed made of ice jade. A young man in a black robe with a cold face was lying on the ice jade bed, quietly sleeping. On the futon not far away, a young woman in a white Taoist robe with 2 ponytails sat upright. Without a doubt, these 2 people were Ji Bai and Shohei. When Ji Tianqing returned to the God-Sealing Mountain, Shohei brought the severely injured and unconscious Ji Bai to the foot of the mountain to heal. Before Ji Tianqing went to the vast divine kingdom, he found Shohei and Ji Bai and asked them to enter the sword world to recuperate. This way the 2 of them would not be separated from him. During this period of time, Shohei and Ji Bai had been healing in the secret room, and had never taken the initiative to call him. Shohei, how is Ji Bai's situation? Ji Tianqing asked Shohei via voice transmission. Shohei, who was meditating, quickly ended his cultivation and replied via voice transmission. Master, Ji Bai's injuries are no longer serious. He will wake up in 2 days at most. Hearing her words, Ji Tianqing was relieved. Thus he changed the topic and asked, Shohei, have you ever heard of the ruins of God? Shohei was startled for a moment, then nodded with a solemn expression. Of course I've heard of it. That is the most mysterious forbidden area on the continent. It is said that the ancient gods are buried there. Master, could it be that you have already arrived at the ruins of God? Ji Tianqing slightly nodded. That's right, I am currently in the ruins of God. Shohei revealed a worried expression and said without hesitation, Master, the ruins of God is filled with danger and unfathomable dangers. Master, please release Shohei to protect your safety. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment, then opened the exit of the sword world. Shwa! With a flash of light, Shohei left the sword world and appeared in front of him. Shohei greets Master. Shohei bowed respectfully to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing nodded and asked, Shohei, have you heard of the ancient gazing platform? Shohei calmly shook his head and explained, Shohei has only heard of the great name of the ruins of God, but I have never been here. Alright, then we can only slowly explore. Ji Tianqing said without changing his expression. Then, he took Shohei and flew into the sky, flying towards the east as fast as lightning. He sped through the sky, and Shohei followed behind him 1,000 feet away, using a secret technique to hide his aura and tracks. On the surface, it seemed that only Ji Tianqing was traveling alone. Ji Tianqing understood that Shohei wanted to protect him in the dark, so that it would be easier for him to move. Unknowingly 10 hours had passed. It was night time, and the pitch-black night shrouded the world. The lead clouds in the sky were thicker, and the biting cold wind was more raging. Ji Tianqing flew for more than 60,000 kilometers, crossing countless gray mountains and desolate valleys. He did not encounter anyone along the way, nor did he encounter any danger. However, he knew in his heart that this should be the periphery of the ruins of God, which was relatively safe. The truly dangerous area was in the depths of the ruins of God. At this moment, a dazzling light suddenly lit up in the pitch-black sky in front of him. That dazzling light was colorful and spread out in the shape of a fan in the pitch-black night sky. At the end of the sky, that dazzling light was like an extremely small light spot. It gradually spread out, forming a huge light shadow. The light shadow stretched across the high night sky and did not dissipate for a long time. It continued to change into different halos and appearances. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing, who was flying and hurrying on his way, immediately raised his eyebrows. This is a phenomenon of heaven and earth? Of course, he could see that it was a phenomenon of heaven and earth caused by some powerful divine object. Even though he was very far away, he could vaguely feel a trace of faint divine power fluctuation. Looking at the source of the light beam, it seems to be in the depths of the ruins of God. I don't know what happened, but it actually caused such a shocking phenomenon of heaven and earth that can be seen from hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. Chapter 1653. If it were anywhere else, even if a phenomenon of heaven and earth appeared, Ji Tianxing would not associate it with the birth of a divine object. However, this was the ruins of God, the most mysterious forbidden land on the continent. It was also the #1 treasure land. This area was said to be the mausoleum of the ancient gods, and countless divine objects and relics were buried there. In the entire Shinwu continent, if there was a place where a divine object was most likely to appear, it would undoubtedly be here. Thus, Ji Tianxing increased his flying speed and flew in the direction of the colorful light. Shohei also saw the dazzling light in the night sky and could tell that it was a special phenomenon of heaven and earth. There was no need for Ji Tianxing to explain. She could also guess what Ji Tianxing was thinking, so she sped up and followed him. Very quickly, another few hours passed. By the time dawn arrived, the five-colored dazzling light in the sky had gradually dissipated. However, Ji Tianxing had identified the direction and estimated the approximate distance. He was about 70 to 80,000 miles away from the source of the colorful light. He would arrive in 12 to 14 hours. The colorful light has already dissipated. There are only two possibilities. Either the divine object has been taken away, or the divine object has gone into hibernation. No matter what the result was, he wanted to rush over as soon as possible to investigate. However, Ji Tianxing had already left the periphery of the ruins of God and entered the depths of the ruins of God. He had only flown a few thousand miles away. Just as he flew over a deep valley, he was attacked by a ferocious beast. It was a giant snake that had cultivated for more than 1,000 years. It had already evolved into an evil dragon. Its body was 1,000 feet long, and its entire body was covered in grayish-brown and dark silver scales. There were also two dark red malignant tumors on its forehead. It had been lurking in the valley the whole time. When Ji Tianxing flew over the valley, it brazenly launched an attack. The poisonous mist that covered the sky and the earth, mixed with more than a dozen water columns formed by poisonous liquid, enveloped Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing sensed that something was wrong. He decisively released his magic power and condensed a layer of magic power shield to protect himself. Bang! 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 Amidst a series of muffled sounds, more than a dozen black water pillars struck him, and the dark green poisonous mist also enveloped him. The terrifying force of the impact sent him flying thousands of meters away. He smashed into a mountain peak on the left side of the valley, causing rocks and dust to fly up into the air. The WRM's strength had already reached the 9th firmament essence spirit realm. It was not far from the tribulation transcendence realm. Once it broke through to the tribulation realm and successfully survived the first heavenly tribulation, the malignant tumor on its head would turn into dragon horns. It would also transform and successfully evolve into a flood dragon. Roar! After the evil flood dragon blasted Ji Tianxing away, it let out an excited roar. Its figure flashed and rushed towards Ji Tianxing. It opened its bloody mouth and bit down viciously. However, just as it rushed in front of Ji Tianxing, several dazzling sword lights lit up in the sky from the side. Swish! Swish! 6 huge icy blue sword lights exploded with unstoppable power, and with lightning speed, they ruthlessly slashed the evil dragon's body. With a series of muffled bangs, the flood dragon's 1,000-feet-long body was cut into 7 pieces in an instant. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere, and dark green venom splattered everywhere. The evil dragon opened its mouth and let out a miserable scream. A few pieces of its corpse fell from the sky and smashed into the valley below. Its physical body was killed on the spot, and its essence spirit immediately emerged from its head and flew into the sky. The grayish-brown snake-shaped essence spirit was like a 2-feet-long gray fog. It looked around in panic, searching for the person who killed its physical body. It was only at this moment that a graceful figure appeared in the sky not far away. It was a young woman in a white robe. She held a 3-foot-long sword and exuded a powerful aura. This person was Shohei. When the evil dragon's essence spirit saw Shohei appear, and sensed her tribulation transcendence realm aura, it immediately fled in fear. Shohei did not show any mercy. She chased after it as fast as lightning and used a secret technique to kill the evil dragon's essence spirit. Then, she flew back to Ji Tianxing's side and asked in a worried tone, "Master, are you injured? How are your injuries?" Ji Tianxing had already removed his magical power shield. He said with a calm expression, "Don't worry, that evil dragon can't hurt me." But it sprayed out a poisonous fog. Shohei was still a little worried and warned, "Master, you should check your injuries carefully to see if you are poisoned." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "My physical body has been tempered thousands of times and is already immune to poison. Let's continue on our way." After saying that, he continued to fly into the depths of the ruins of God. Shohei saw that his aura was stable, and there was nothing unusual, so she followed him with relief. 2 hours later, Ji Tianxing encountered danger again. The danger this time did not come from the ferocious beasts. There was an inconspicuous low hill in the mountains that was shrouded in heavy fog. When Ji Tianxing flew over the hill, a terrifying devouring force suddenly came from under his feet. It was as if an invisible hand had grabbed him and pulled him down. Caught off guard, he was pulled into the heavy fog by the terrifying devouring force. Only then did he see clearly that under the cover of the fog, there was a black hole covered by rubble on the hill. The black hole, with a radius of 10 feet, was like a bottomless abyss, but also like the huge mouth of a ferocious beast that wanted to devour people. It looked rather sinister and terrifying. The invisible devouring force was so powerful that it could almost tear space apart. It was comparable to the full-strength attack of a tribulation stage powerhouse. Ji Tianxing struggled with all his might. He did not hesitate to use all his strength and used his teleportation technique. However, he still could not resist the devouring force of the black hole. He continued to fall and was about to be swallowed into the mysterious black hole. At the critical moment, Shohei rushed over and desperately pulled him out of the black hole and escaped from the fog. After this incident, Ji Tianxing realized that the hidden danger in the ruins of God did not only come from the ferocious demons and beasts. This was the ancient ruins of God, the most special forbidden area on the continent. Anything could happen. After calmly analyzing it, he determined that the mysterious black hole was most likely a spatial rift. Once he was swallowed by the black hole, he would die without a doubt. The incomparably powerful spatial power would tear him into pieces, leaving not even a trace of him behind. After that, Ji Tianxing became even more cautious. About an hour later, he had just flown over a 10,000 feet tall mountain when he discovered a stream of flame in the sky to his side. Within the dark red flames, a tall figure was wrapped in it. Ji Tianxing was immediately alert. He carefully observed and saw that it was a burly middle-aged man with a head full of red hair. Swoosh! The middle-aged man went straight for Ji Tianxing and stopped 100 steps in front of him. "Hey kid, do you also want to go to Mount Fulong to get a share of the loot?" The middle-aged man sized up Ji Tianxing and asked in a frivolous tone. He was wearing black leather armor. His left hand was on his waist, and his right hand was holding a broadsword on his shoulder. He exuded an unruly aura. Chapter 1654. The red-haired man was obviously from the Xinwu continent. Furthermore, he had the strength of a first-level tribulation realm cultivator. In this divine ruins that was filled with danger, any stranger could become an enemy, so how could Ji Tianxing let his guard down? Moreover, the red-haired man was filled with arrogance and bloodthirst, so he was obviously not a good person. What surprised Ji Tianxing was that after the red-haired man sized him up, he curled his lips and sneered. He, a mere primordial spirit realm junior dares to come to the ruins of God to search for treasures? You must be tired of living. Kid, let Big Brother Huokui advise you to leave this place quickly. The divine item in Mount Hidden Dragon isn't something you can touch. Don't lose your life when the time comes. After hearing his words, Ji Tianxing could tell that something was amiss. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "You're Huokui, an adventurer who often roams the ruins of God?" "That's right. You're not too stupid." Huokui nodded and grinned. Ji Tianxing continued to ask, "Mount Hidden Dragon is tens of thousands of kilometers away. You haven't even reached there yet. So how do you know that a divine item has appeared there? It seems that you know a lot about Mount Hidden Dragon and that divine item. Huokui glanced at him and revealed a playful smile. Oh, you want to trick me? What, you still haven't given up? Ji Tianqing calmly replied. Divine items are rare. Even if I don't have the fate to obtain them, it's still good to be able to take a look. Huokui had a frivolous attitude and nodded. Since you're so stubborn and insist on crashing into Mount Hidden Dragon, I'll fulfill your wish this time. Didn't you want to ask for information? Show some sincerity first. As he spoke, he rubbed his fingers at Ji Tianqing, looking like he was asking for money. Ji Tianqing didn't beat around the bush and said straightforwardly, Name your price. 30,000 spirit stones, not one less. Huokui stretched out 3 fingers and smiled. I guarantee that you'll get the information you want. Ji Tianqing didn't bargain with him, and simply took out 30,000 spirit stones. He waved his hand, and shot out a golden light, and sent it over. When Huokui saw this, an almost undetectable trace of anger flashed through his eyes. Obviously, he did not expect Ji Tianqing to be so straightforward. If he had known earlier, he would have definitely asked for an exorbitant price. Ha ha ha, so generous. Looks like this kid is a fat sheep. Huokui sneered inwardly. He extended his hand and grabbed the golden ball of light. After counting the 30,000 spirit stones, he put them all into his spatial ring. Very good. Brat, you sure are straightforward. Huokui gave Ji Tianqing a thumbs up and revealed an appreciative smile. Let's talk as we walk. If we're late, we won't make it in time. He flew side by side with Ji Tianqing. As they rushed to Mount Fulong, he explained the cause of the incident. A month ago, some adventurers spread the news that there was a divine light flickering in Mount Fulong. I led a few brothers to investigate, but we found nothing. In the following month, the divine light appeared frequently, and even I saw it once. After the news spread, several groups of adventurers went to investigate. However, a group of mysterious powerhouses seized the opportunity and occupied Mount Fulong. Several adventurers tried to force their way in, but they were all killed by those mysterious powerhouses. Only one veteran managed to escape, but his physical body was destroyed. Only his primordial spirit was left, and his mind was no longer clear. The more powerful those mysterious powerhouses were, the more certain I was that there must be a divine item hidden in Mount Fulong. So, I sent 2 brothers to stay near Mount Fulong to keep an eye on it. Last night, the divine item finally appeared. When he heard this, Ji Tianqing understood the gist of it. Since ancient times, there had always been adventurers who lived on the edge of their blades. They searched for divine tombs and historical remains in the ruins of God, hoping to find divine items and treasures. Huokui was one of those adventurers, and he was an experienced veteran. Last night, the 2 adventurers who stayed behind to keep an eye on Mount Fulong discovered that the divine item had appeared. So they sent a message to Huokui. Huokui hurried to Mount Fulong after receiving the news. Ji Tianqing nodded and asked, Then, do you know what the divine item that appeared in Mount Fulong is? Huokui smiled proudly and nodded. Of course I know. Otherwise, why would I have my brothers keep an eye on it? However, if you want to know, you'll have to pay more. Before he could finish, Ji Tianqing sneered. Is it because I gave you the 30,000 spirit stones too readily? Do you think I'm a fat sheep? Do you know why I didn't bargain with you? It's because you can't do anything in front of me. Ji Tianqing's tone was full of confidence and domineering aura, which stunned Huokui and made him frown deeply. He carefully sized up Ji Tianqing with a complicated gaze. He couldn't make up his mind. His sharp intuition told him that Ji Tianqing's actions and temperament were extraordinary, so he definitely had an extraordinary background. However, he couldn't understand where a brat at the 7th level of the primordial soul realm got such strong confidence from. After a moment of silence, Huokui quickly explained with a smile in order to resolve the awkwardness. Little brother, the divine item in Mount Fulong is a rare treasure that can shock the world. If I sell this information, people will buy it for 300,000 or even 3 million spirit stones, let alone 30,000 spirit stones. Ji Tianqing didn't waste any more words with him. He took out another 20,000 spirit stones and threw them in front of him. Speak. Huokui picked up the 20,000 spirit stones wrapped in golden light. After weighing them in his hand, he put them into his ring. Speaking of that divine item, I have to mention the origin of the name Mount Fulong. According to legend, Mount Fulong was formed from the corpse of an ancient divine dragon. The divine dragon's flesh and blood turned into soil, while its bones turned into mountain rocks and/or veins. Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, "It's just a legend. Don't listen to it. Get to the point." Huokui pursed his lips and continued. According to my brothers and my investigation, the divine item in the depths of Mount Fulong is very likely a drop of dragon blood. In ancient times, the divine dragon's corpse returned to the world, and its flesh and bones turned into a mountain range. Now that tens of thousands of years have passed, Mount Fulong has undergone some special changes under the influence of the world's spiritual energy. Therefore, all the energy in Mount Fulong has gathered into a drop of divine dragon blood. That's the essence of an ancient divine dragon's power. If anyone can obtain that drop of divine dragon blood, they can inherit the divine dragon's legacy and obtain the divine dragon's power. They have great hopes of reaching the deity realm. At this point, Huokui's tone was rather impassioned. He was filled with excitement and anticipation, and his eyes were shining. However, Ji Tianxing's reaction was indifferent. He said expressionlessly, "What nonsense?" Huokui saw that he didn't believe him, and immediately laughed. "Ha ha ha. Little brother, you're too ignorant. Although this sounds inconceivable, this is the ruins of God, the most mysterious land of buried gods on the continent." Chapter 1655. Huokui made a solemn vow. Ji Tianxing didn't believe him on the surface, but he had his own plans in mind. Even if Huokui teased him, he couldn't be bothered. Very quickly another 6 hours passed. It was evening again. The two of them finally arrived near Mount Fulong. When they were still a few hundred miles away, Huokui pointed at the huge grayish-brown mountain range in front of them and said to Ji Tianxing, "Little brother, that's Mount Fulong." Ji Tianxing looked into the distance and saw the huge mountain range. It indeed stretched for thousands of miles. Looking down from the sky, the mountain range really did look like a divine dragon lying on the ground. The grayish-brown mountain ridge was sharp and full of power, just like the back of an ancient divine dragon. The few branches that extended from the foot of the mountain also spread out like a dragon's claw. When Ji Tianxing saw Mount Fulong with his own eyes, he finally understood why Huokui was so fanatical and claimed that the mountain was formed by a divine dragon. Before long, the two of them flew a few hundred miles away and arrived above Mount Fulong. Ji Tianxing's sharp senses detected that the air around Mount Fulong was still filled with thick spiritual qi of heaven and earth, as well as faint ripples of divine power. The facts proved that a divine item had really appeared in Mount Fulong. He looked around a few hundred miles ahead of him and saw a faint shadow streaking across the sky. It seemed that some adventurers were still lingering in the depths of Mount Fulong. At that moment, Huokui took out a silver arrow and released it after injecting his magic power. Whoosh! The arrow shot into the sky and exploded, turning into silver light that could be seen from a few hundred miles away. Ji Tianxing knew that Huokui was calling for his companions. As expected, before long, two streaks of light flew out of Mount Fulong and rushed over as fast as lightning. Whoosh! Whoosh! The two streaks of light stopped in front of them. After the light faded, two middle-aged men appeared. One of them had a body as sturdy as a boulder and was wearing a thick black armor. The other was as thin as a bamboo pole and wore black leather armor. He had a shifty-eyed appearance. Once the two of them bowed to Huokui, their gazes landed on Ji Tianxing. They sized him up with puzzlement and wariness. "Boss Huokui, who is this brat?" "Big brother, this kid looks very unfamiliar. Could it be that he's a newbie that you're grooming?" Huokui was still concerned about the matter of the divine dragon's blood, so he couldn't be bothered to waste his breath with them. "I met this kid on the road. Didn't I ask you two to keep an eye on him? Where are the divine items? Who stole it?" The shifty-eyed skinny man hurriedly replied, "Big brother, the divine object was born last night and was only taken away this morning." The people who had snatched away the divine object were the group of mysterious experts from before. Their strength is too strong. The two of us can't get close at all, let alone follow them. We can only wait here for you. Wuxia immediately furrowed his brows and angrily shouted, "Bastard! The divine object that I've been eyeing for more than a month was snatched away by them so easily? Weren't there a few groups of people squatting near Mount Fulong? Could it be that those bastards didn't try to snatch it? Did they just watch as the divine object was snatched away?" The black-armored man explained. Those groups of adventurers all took action and fought with those mysterious experts for a long time. Unfortunately, those adventurers weren't strong enough and weren't able to snatch the divine object. More than 10 of their experts were even killed. Big brother, look over there. Those are the traces left behind by their fight. They fought and fled in that direction. After saying that, the black-armored man pointed towards the depths of Mount Fulong. Mount Fulong and the surrounding mountain ranges were filled with huge ravines and gaps. There were also several deep pits that were dozens of kilometers in radius. Looking over, at least a few hundred kilometers in radius, it was a scene of devastation. Wuxia immediately turned pale with fright. He exclaimed in disbelief, "The strength of those mysterious experts is actually this strong?" The black-armored man hurriedly nodded and said with lingering fear, "Big brother, with our strength, it's impossible for us to snatch the divine object. There's an ugly shorty among those mysterious experts. He's terrifyingly strong and can kill the three of us by himself." The shifty-eyed skinny man also nodded in agreement and said with a bit of fear, "Big brother, we saw it with our own eyes. Why don't we just give up? No matter how precious the divine object is, we can't abandon our lives." Wuxia's expression was as cold as ice. His gaze fluctuated for a while before he cursed unwillingly, "Son of a bitch! I'll remember this grudge. Don't let me find out their identities. Sooner or later, I'll kill them all and snatch the divine object back." The black-armored man and skinny man nodded repeatedly and cursed with righteous indignation. The three of them quieted down, and their gazes landed on Ji Tianxing. The shifty-eyed skinny man rolled his eyes and gave Wuxia a meaningful look. He transmitted his voice and asked, "Big brother, is the little lamb fat?" Wuxia was stunned for a moment before he grinned. "Of course it's fat. It's so fat that it's oozing oil. As the saying goes, what you lose on the swings, you gain on the roundabouts. I can't get the divine object, but I can't work for nothing." The black-armored man quickly nodded, and a cruel sneer appeared on his dark face. The shifty-eyed skinny man smiled and flattered, "Big brother, you've become more knowledgeable recently. Your words are becoming more and more refined." Ji Tianxing listened to their conversation and silently observed the situation in Mount Fulong while thinking about his next move. He suddenly sensed that the atmosphere wasn't good. He turned his head and saw Wuxia and the other two surrounding him with sinister smiles. Wuxia carried his palm-sized broadsword and sneered, "Little brother, are you going to do it yourself, or do you want me to help you?" The black-armored man licked his lips with a bloodthirsty look in his eyes. He said with killing intent, "Boss, I think we should follow the old rules and chop him up. Then we'll count the spoils." The shifty-eyed skinny man smiled and said with a mocking tone, "Don't be so rough. I can see that this brat has an extraordinary bearing. He probably comes from an extraordinary family and has a lot of money. Big brother, why don't we leave him alive and extort some money from his family and make a big deal?" Wuxia thought for a moment and shook his head. "That's a good idea, but I don't want to go through so much trouble." After saying that, he rushed in front of Ji Tianxing in a flash. With a clang, he pulled out his treasured blade and placed it against Ji Tianxing's neck. "Brat, you can either leave your wealth behind or leave your life behind." If it were a normal disciple of an aristocratic family, they would have been stunned by such a turn of events. If it were someone with a weak temperament, they might even pee in their pants. Wuxia was used to using this move. He had robbed and killed countless young cultivators. It was a tried and tested method. However, he met Ji Tianxing this time. Ji Tianxing's expression remained calm and composed. Even when a blade was placed against his neck, he didn't blink. His heart didn't waver at all. He even felt like laughing. "Hee, you really are a vicious executioner. You don't deserve to die." Chapter 1656. Ji Tianqing's reaction left Hukuei and the other two dumbfounded. They had robbed and killed countless people. Most of the cultivators they had met had made a fool of themselves in such a situation. Some trembled in fear as they tried to curry favor with others. Some cried bitterly as they kowtowed and begged for mercy. There were even some who fled in panic. However, they had never met someone like Ji Tianqing. Even when death was at hand, his expression didn't change. He was still as confident and arrogant as before. The black-armored man furrowed his brows in doubt. He turned his head to look at the skinny man beside him and asked softly, "What did his last words mean?" Before the skinny man could answer, Hukuei shouted with a face full of anger. "He said we're tired of living." The black-armored man was unable to restrain his anger. He glared at Ji Tianqing with murderous intent and shouted, "Brat! You really won't shed tears until you see the coffin. There are at least 800 fat sheep like you who have died under my blade, if not 1,000. Hukuei furrowed his brows and stared coldly at Ji Tianqing. He asked with a cold voice, "Brat, it seems you'd rather die than submit? You only have one life. You better think carefully." Ji Tianqing's reaction was too calm. It made Hukuei feel inexplicably worried and anxious. He couldn't understand. Ji Tianqing was only at the 7th level of the Essence Soul Realm. Where did he get the confidence to challenge him? He was a first-level tribulation-passing realm expert. The black-armored man and the skinny man were also at the 9th level of the Essence Soul Realm. To the three of them, killing Ji Tianqing was as easy as pie. Ji Tianqing stared at Hukuei. The corner of his mouth curled into a mocking sneer. He said with a playful tone, "I can take your dog life without lifting a finger. Do you believe me?" Hukuei was immediately enraged. His patience was completely exhausted. He shouted with a cold voice, "Brat! Since you insist on courting death, I'll fulfill your wish." As he said that, his right hand erupted with a berserk power. He brandished his palm-sized broadsword and ruthlessly slashed at Ji Tianqing's neck. The broadsword was less than half a meter away from Ji Tianqing's neck. Hukuei believed that no one would be able to dodge at such a close distance. In the next moment, Ji Tianqing's neck would be cut off, and his head would be separated from his body. However, what happened next left him dumbfounded. Shwa! Ji Tianqing's body flashed, and he disappeared into thin air. As expected, Hukuei missed. In the next moment, when Ji Tianqing's figure reappeared, he was already standing in the sky 10 li away. His expression was still indifferent and calm, and there was even a disdainful sneer on the corner of his mouth. Hukuei widened his eyes in disbelief, as if he had seen a ghost. However, before he could react, a dazzling cold light had already lit up behind him. Swish! Swish! 6 cold and dazzling sword lights, carrying the power to pierce through everything, enveloped his figure. The sword lights came too suddenly and appeared out of nowhere, catching Hukuei completely off guard. With a series of muffled bangs, Hukuei's body was cut into several pieces by the 6 sword lights. Scorching hot blood sprayed out, splashing scarlet flowers in the sky. Hukuei, who was at the first stage of the tribulation-passing realm, was instantly killed just like that. The black-armored man and the skinny man were stupefied on the spot. Both of them widened their eyes in shock as they watched the scene in disbelief. They couldn't believe that the valiant and brutal Hukuei's boss was actually so weak that he was instantly killed by someone. The most frightening thing was that they didn't even see the person who did it. Immediately after, a fiery red origin spirit flew out from the pieces of Hukuei's corpse. Hukuei was also quite valiant. His first reaction wasn't to run away, but to pounce at Ji Tianqing. Shwa! The dark red origin spirit instantly swelled to several dozen meters long and turned into a huge blood-red eagle. It swooped down at Ji Tianqing. He knew clearly that the person who attacked him was someone else. That person was definitely protecting Ji Tianqing, and their strength was several levels higher than his. If he wanted to live, he could only kidnap Ji Tianqing. Hukuei was smart enough and reacted quickly. Unfortunately, the other party was already prepared. Shwa shwa shwa. Another 9 dazzling icy blue sword lights appeared, illuminating the dusky sky and enveloping Hukuei's origin spirit. Bang 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 bang. A series of muffled bangs rang out. Huakuei's origin spirit was cut into pieces on the spot, splashing in all directions. Huakuei died just like that. The other party had only used 2 moves, one to destroy his physical body, and the other to destroy his origin spirit. It was clean and efficient, and so powerful that it made one tremble in fear. The black-armored man and the skinny man finally regained their senses. They were already scared out of their wits. Their expressions changed drastically. Without any hesitation, they turned around and flew away, respectively to the east and west. Both of them were experienced adventurers who had walked on the edge of life and death countless times. In such a situation, fleeing in different directions had already become their instinct. However, it was too late for them to escape. Shua, Ji Tianqing's figure flashed, and he teleported a dozen miles away, blocking the black-armored man's path. You still want to escape even now? You're too naive. Ji Tianqing sneered. He took out the Burial of Heaven and ruthlessly stabbed at the black-armored man. Piercing sword. A cold star appeared, instantly piercing through the black-armored man's armor and body. In the next instant, a terrifying sword aura exploded within the black-armored man's body, releasing a dazzling mushroom cloud. Bang! The black-armored man couldn't resist at all. His body was blown to bits on the spot, and blood splattered all over the sky. Even his origin spirit was injured by the divine lightning contained within the sword light. It floated in the sky in a daze. Ji Tianqing struck out with his sword again, and killed his primordial spirit. At the same time, in the sky 20 miles away, the skinny man was also killed by several icy blue sword lights. His physical body and origin spirit were destroyed by the sword lights, and he died on the spot. In just a few breaths of time, Huakuei and his 2 accomplices died one after another. Even when they were about to die, the 3 of them didn't see who had attacked them in the dark. They died in a daze. In the blink of an eye, the sky returned to normal. Only then did Shohei, who was wearing a white Taoist robe, appear. She waved her hand and shot out a few streams of light. She found 3 spatial rings among the ruins and corpse fragments. Then, she flew to Ji Tianqing's side and handed the 3 spatial rings to Ji Tianqing. Master, these are your spoils of war. Ji Tianqing nodded and accepted the 3 spatial rings. He would deal with them when he had time in the future. Follow me, he instructed Shohei, then turned around and flew into the depths of Mount Fulong. Shohei hurriedly followed and asked telepathically, Master, could it be that you want to chase after that group of mysterious powerhouses and snatch the divine item? Of course, Ji Tianqing said without hesitation. Huakuei swore that the divine item was the divine dragon's blood. Of course I can't miss it. Shohei also knew very well how astonishing the harvest would be if she could really obtain a drop of divine dragon's blood. She didn't say anything else. She used a secret technique of invisibility again, and quietly followed beside Ji Tianqing. Before long, the 2 of them entered the depths of Mount Fulong. Ji Tianqing stood at the peak of Mount Fulong and looked at the ravines, pits, and ruins around him. He observed with sharp eyes. Chapter 1657. The battle between that group of mysterious experts and a few groups of adventurers happened 4 hours ago. In the ruins deep in the hidden Dragon Mountain, there were still remnants of mixed dermic powers. However, Ji Tianqing sensed a strange aura fluctuation from the many dermic powers. He frowned in confusion, somewhat in disbelief. Then, he carefully checked again, and finally confirmed that his judgment was correct. He immediately revealed a sneer and said in a playful tone, I really didn't expect to meet them here. They really are persistent. With that said, he summoned his Essence Soul Golden Sword and transformed it into a 10-foot-long golden sword. He stepped on it and sped away. Shohei, those guys just left not long ago. Let's chase with all our might. We will definitely catch up to them before dark. As he spoke, he rode the golden sword through the sky and flew north as fast as a stream of light. When Shohei saw that his speed had increased 3-fold, he had no choice but to use all his strength to cast the swift technique, to keep up with his footsteps. Master is indeed a rare genius in the world. He is only at the 7th level of the Essence Soul realm, but he can reach such a terrifying flying speed. Shohei was extremely shocked and admired Ji Tianxing even more. For the next few hours, Ji Tianxing and Shohei continued to speed along. The two of them crossed countless mountain ranges and ravines. Along the way, they constantly discovered traces of fighting. Many mountain ranges had collapsed, and countless ravines were filled with gravel. There were still remnants of chaotic dermic powers in the air. Even so, Ji Tianxing could still quickly find that special aura among the mixed auras. Unknowingly, 12 hours had passed. It was late at night. The sky was as dark as ink, and the cold wind howled. Ji Tianxing and Shohei flew for 50,000 kilometers and went deeper into the ruins of God. Finally, Ji Tianxing slowed down his flying speed and put the Essence Soul Golden Sword back into his body. He released his divine sense to investigate his surroundings, and his eyes flickered with a sharp cold light. Shohei followed in the darkness and asked with a voice transmission, "Master, what's going on? Did you lose the clues?" "No." Ji Tianxing shook his head and said solemnly, "The aura of those guys dissipated here. If I'm not wrong, the adventurers who snatched the divine object have been shaken off by them, or all of them have been killed." Shohei was silent for a moment before asking, "Then should we continue chasing?" Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly, a confident smile appeared on his face. He shook his head and said, "There's no need to chase. We've already found them." "Ha!" Shohei was stunned. After a while, she finally reacted and asked uncertainly, "Master, do you mean that those mysterious experts fled here because they thought they were safe, or because their injuries were too severe? So, they used a secret technique to conceal their auras and hid here to rest temporarily?" Ji Tianxing nodded approvingly and said, "That's right, they are definitely within a radius of 200 miles. Let's split up and search." Shohei responded and hurriedly turned around to fly away. He also released his divine sense to investigate the situation. After about 100 breaths of time, Ji Tianxing's divine sense swept across a 10,000-foot-tall mountain peak. Suddenly, he raised his eyebrows. His powerful divine sense could penetrate the entire 10,000-foot-tall mountain and investigate every stone in the mountain clearly. However, there was a huge rock in the belly of the mountain. It seemed to be covered by a layer of fog, and he could not see it clearly. So it's here. Ji Tianxing took out the Burial of Heaven sword. His figure flashed into the belly of the mountain and arrived in front of the huge rock. Although the belly of the mountain was pitch black, his eyes were sharp and sharp. After observing for a moment at close range, he saw something strange. There was an obscure mana fluctuation in the huge rock. It was obvious that some kind of formation had been set up to deceive others. Ji Tianxing did not hesitate. He waved the Burial of Heaven sword in his right hand and slashed at the huge rock. Bang! With a dull loud sound, a dazzling golden sword light bloomed in the rock layer. The terrifying power caused the entire mountain to collapse on the spot. A huge ravine split open from the middle, splitting it into two halves. Gravel flew everywhere, covering the sky for dozens of miles. A loud rumbling sound echoed in the night sky. Shohei was alarmed. He hurriedly rushed over and hid beside Ji Tianxing. The huge black rock was also split into pieces. A pitch-black light barrier with a radius of 100 feet appeared on the spot. Pitch-black demonic chi lingered on the sturdy and thick light barrier. It constantly flickered with a dark red blood light. Ji Tianxing stood in the huge ravine and looked down at the light barrier. He held the Burial of Heaven sword with both hands and slashed down again. Broken Moon Sword. He unleashed 100% of his strength and slashed out a huge golden sword 1,000 feet long. With purple divine lightning, it slashed toward the black light barrier. Although the light barrier was a tribulation-level formation, his power was very terrifying. However, the power of his sword was extremely terrifying. Even if it could not destroy the formation, it could still shake its foundation. The huge golden sword was about to hit the black light barrier. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly flew out of the light barrier. It released a black light blade 1,000 feet long and slashed toward the huge golden sword. Boom! The huge golden sword and the black light blade collided, producing a thunderous explosion. The two light blades collapsed at the same time, exploding into thousands of pieces and splattering in all directions. An incomparably violent shockwave hit the collapsed mountain. Instantly, the entire mountain was blasted into pieces, turning into a mighty torrent of earth and rocks that spread in all directions. A moment later, the night sky regained its clarity. The 1,000-feet-tall mountain was gone. Only ruins with a radius of dozens of miles were left. They were covered in gravel and dust. The black shadow flew into the night sky and stood 10,000 feet in front of Ji Tianxing. It cursed with a venomous tone. "Lowly worm, how dare you chase me here? I will skin you alive and swallow you alive." The black shadow was a pitch-black demonic fog that wrapped around a 1-meter-tall child. His skin was dark, and he had a large bald head that was covered with ferocious ghost runes. A pair of dark green eyes flashed with a ferocious light that wanted to devour people. Ji Tianxing looked at him coldly with a sneer on his lips. He said in a mocking tone, "It really is you, ugly bastard. We meet again." There was no doubt that the ugly child in the black shadow was one of the 36 demon monarchs, Ghost Child. Ghost Child was furious and full of murderous intent. Suddenly hearing Ji Tianxing's words, his body stiffened and his dark green eyes contracted. After carefully sizing up Ji Tianxing, his eyes flashed with a fierce light. He shouted in disbelief, "It's you, Ji Tianxing?" After being stunned for a moment, he came back to his senses. He immediately opened his toad-like mouth and sneered, "Ha ha ha ha, the heavens are helping me. I came to the ruins of God to carry out a mission, and I actually met you. What an unexpected surprise." Chapter 1658. Previously, Ji Tianxing had detected the aura of the demons in Mount Fulong. He was very familiar and sensitive to the demonic aura, which was why he could track the demonic aura all the way here. However, he only knew that the mysterious expert who snatched the divine item was a demon. He did not expect that the demon expert who snatched the divine item was Ghost Child. Seeing Ghost Child full of surprise and laughter, the sneer on his face deepened. "Ghost Child, back in the Arctic abyss, I have always regretted not being able to kill you. I didn't expect to meet you here today. This is good. I can make up for my regret back then and execute you on the spot." Ji Tianxing's left hand was behind his back, his right hand holding the Burial of Heaven sword, exuding a powerful murderous aura. Ghost Child rolled his green eyes and sneered contemptuously. "Haha, little bastard. Where did you get your confidence from? How dare you boast so shamelessly? Back in the Arctic abyss, if you had not escaped in time, I would have turned you to ashes." Ji Tianxing's eyes shone with a cold light, and he said in a deep voice, "There's no point in talking anymore. Get your demons out here. I can deal with them all at once." "Ha ha ha." Ghost Child laughed even more arrogantly, and said in a mocking tone, "In just a few months, your strength has not increased much, but your tone is ridiculously arrogant. A worm like you is not worthy of me personally taking action. The few venerables under my command can easily kill you." As his voice fell, 3 blood-red lights flew out of the black light barrier and arrived in the night sky as fast as lightning. The 3 blood-red lights stopped beside Ghost Child and immediately dispersed, surrounding Ji Tianxing. Each blood-red light condensed into a different shape, turning into a giant, a ferocious giant demon, and a 1,000-foot-tall behemoth. Without a doubt, these were the 3 blood gods. Each blood god's strength had reached the 8th level of the essence soul realm and above, and their auras were extremely powerful. However, Ji Tianxing acutely sensed a problem. Ghost Child and the 3 blood gods' auras were fluctuating, clearly not in peak condition. He didn't need to guess to know that Ghost Child and blood god's sons must have used up a lot of their magic power in the previous battle, and they hadn't recovered yet. This was good news for him. Ghost Child looked at Ji Tianxing with a cold smile, and said calmly, "Kid, you're about to taste the feeling of dying in despair and pain. Kill him. Use the cruelest and bloodiest methods to make you regret being born into this world." Following his order, the 3 blood gods' illusions let out bloodthirsty roars and rushed towards Ji Tianxing with murderous intent. Swish, swish. The 3 blood gods' illusions attacked from 3 different directions. The giant unleashed a demonic spell technique, creating a bloody light that blotted out the sky. The giant demon released a gray fog of death, as well as a formless poison. The gigantic beast, which was as large as a mountain, charged towards Ji Tianxing, wanting to smash him into smithereens. Ji Tianxing did not panic in the face of danger. He quickly raised the magic power in his body to the peak. He waved his sword and used his killer move. 7-star sword. The Burial of Heaven sword slashed out 7 giant golden swords that were hundreds of feet long. With rolling purple lightning, they slashed towards the 3 blood gods' illusions. The 7 streaks of sword light, and the sky full of bloody light all collapsed, turning into countless fragments that splashed in all directions. Billions of lightning arcs surrounded the 3 blood gods' illusions. They crackled and flashed, dazzling everyone's eyes. The 3 blood gods' illusions were knocked back, and they screamed in pain from the lightning arcs. Ghost Child frowned when he saw this. He didn't expect Ji Tianxing to be so powerful. Not only could he block the attacks of the 3 blood gods' illusions, but he could also push them back. This was far beyond his expectations. 3 useless trash. You still need me to do it myself. Ghost Child cursed with a gloomy face. He immediately took out a long black sword and slashed at Ji Tianxing with both hands. Sky-shattering divine ghost. The black sword was a tribulation-level Dharma treasure of the demonic Tao. It contained a cold aura of death. The long sword slashed out a giant blade of black light that was hundreds of feet long. It fell from the sky and slashed at Ji Tianxing. The giant blade of black light locked onto Ji Tianxing's primordial spirit from thousands of feet away. He was enveloped by the aura of death, and his body was cold and stiff. However, just as the giant blade of black light slashed down from the night sky, it was blocked when it was still hundreds of feet away from Ji Tianxing. 6 icy blue swords emerged from the night sky and slashed at the giant blade of black light. Kaboom! With a loud explosion, the giant blade of black light shattered on the spot. It turned into black fragments and dissipated. Ghost Child was shocked. He turned his head to look at the night sky to the side, and a cold light burst out of his eyes. Despicable little bastard, you have helpers. No wonder you dare to be so arrogant. His dark green eyes bloomed with bloodthirsty killing intent as he stared at a certain spot in the night sky. Without a doubt, he had discovered Shohei. Previously, Shohei did not make a move. She relied on her powerful concealment technique to hide in the dark without attracting any attention. Now that she had made a move, Ghost Child would naturally be able to detect her presence. When Shohei saw that her whereabouts had been exposed, she decided not to hide anymore and showed herself openly. Swoosh swoosh swoosh, she teleported behind Ghost Child and waved her icy blue sword. She pierced out 9 sharp cold glints which enveloped Ghost Child. Ghost Child sneered and his murderous intent rose sharply. He shouted in disdain. I thought Ji Tianxing had some backing, but I didn't expect it to be a 4th stage realm girl. You're courting death. He apparently didn't put Shohei in his eyes. He waved his long sword wildly and slashed out 10 over pitch black sword glints as he fought with Shohei. Bam bam bam. Kaboom! The sword glints and sword glints collided in the night sky and exploded with a loud bang. It lit up with a dazzling brilliance. Instantly, endless fragments spread out and lit up the surrounding 100 miles. A terrifying shockwave spread out like a ripple, causing the surrounding mountains to crumble continuously. Ghost Child's attack was extremely swift, and his sword technique was unpredictable. It was extremely strange. He completely suppressed Shohei and forced her to retreat, getting further and further away from Ji Tianxing. After a short 100 breaths, she was forced to retreat 200 miles, but she was still unable to get rid of Ghost Child's attack. She was worried about Ji Tianxing's situation. She was extremely anxious, but there was nothing she could do. She could only pray silently, hoping that Ji Tianxing could block the siege of the 3 blood gods' illusions, and that his life would not be in danger. At the same time, 200 miles away in the night sky, Ji Tianxing and the 3 blood gods' illusions were fighting fiercely. Although the 3 blood gods' illusions were very strong and had a tacit understanding when they joined forces to attack. But Ji Tianxing knew the blood gods' illusions very well. He was well aware of their weaknesses and had mastered the power of God's thunder to restrain them. Therefore, the 3 blood gods' illusions couldn't do anything to him, and instead were constantly injured by him. In a short period of time, the three blood gods' illusions could still hold on. Chapter 1659. Whoosh! Ji Tianxing held the sword of burial of heaven, and stabbed with all his might. A cold light appeared, and instantly pierced through the chest of a blood god. The blood god was a blood-colored beast that was hundreds of feet tall. It was as huge as a mountain, and had a very violent aura. However, in front of Ji Tianxing, all of this was just a facade. Bang! With a muffled explosion, a dazzling cold light exploded inside the beast's body. Suddenly, a blazing white mushroom cloud rose and lit up the night sky. The blood-colored beast was blown into countless pieces and scattered in the sky. Seeing this scene, the other two blood gods' illusions were stunned, and their eyes were filled with shock. However, they were not worried about the lives of their companions. They thought that with their immortal bodies, they could quickly recover, even if they were blown into pieces. However, a scene that terrified them appeared. Before the pieces could gather, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and unleashed an overwhelming white light. The pure white light contained a majestic holy power. It was as if it came from the gods and could purify all filth and evil in the world. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the holy white light enveloped the fragments and enveloped them. The moment the dark red fragments of light came into contact with the holy white light, they were like snow under the scorching sun, quickly melting and disintegrating. In the short span of 2 breaths, the bloody fragments that filled the sky had all disappeared. The holy white light purified all the fragments and swallowed the entire blood god. When Ji Tianxing withdrew the white light, the blood god had completely disappeared. The other 2 blood gods had never encountered such a situation, and could not believe their eyes. Oh my god! What just happened? What's going on? We have immortal bodies. There's no way to completely destroy us. Intense fear and despair instantly enveloped the 2 blood gods. They were at a loss, and did not know what to do. Ji Tianxing did not stop, and attacked with his sword again. Moon-breaking sword. He roared and used all his strength to slash out a giant sword that could shatter space and break the moon. One of the blood gods was caught off guard, and was immediately hit by the giant golden sword. Its 10-jong-tall giant body was directly chopped into pieces by the giant sword, and scattered in the night sky. The giant sword contained divine lightning arcs that enveloped every piece of the bloody light, and flashed with crackling sounds. It was terrified and subconsciously gathered the fragments, wanting to reform its body. However, the divine lightning suppressed it, and prevented it from reforming quickly. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianxing waved his hand again, and unleashed a dazzling white light. Whoosh! The holy white light poured down like a flood and covered all the bloody light fragments. In the blink of an eye, all the bloody light fragments were purified, and then swallowed by the sky-mending orb. The second blood god's son disappeared. Only the third blood god's descendant was left. It was scared out of its wits, and ran away in a panic. Kids too. What kind of a monster is this kid? How can he kill us? As the blood god's scion fled towards Ghost Child, it roared in shock in its heart. If it had not seen it with its own eyes, it would not have believed it. Whoosh! The blood god turned into a ray of bloody light, and cut through the night sky as fast as lightning. Soon it flew hundreds of miles away. It had already seen Ghost Child. He was more than 100 miles away, and was fighting fiercely with Shohei. It thought that in 2 more breaths, it would be able to escape to Demon Lord Ghost Child's side. Then it would be safe. However, that short 100 miles was a moat that it could never cross. Die! A cold, murderous shout suddenly sounded from behind it. Then, a giant golden sword that was hundreds of feet long slashed down from the sky. Boom! With a muffled sound, the blood god was hit by the giant sword, and its body collapsed into pieces. Before it could reform, a holy white light poured down and drowned the pieces of its body. Therefore, it also lost consciousness and disappeared on the spot. Ji Tianxing used the heaven-mending orb to kill 3 blood gods in a row. It could be said that it was clean and efficient. After the heaven-mending orb devoured the 3 blood gods, its power increased a little, and it returned to calm. Ji Tianxing looked up at the night sky in the distance. Then, he used the divine concealment step and went invisible. When he came close, he saw that Shohei was in a bad situation. She was being beaten back by Ghost Child and could only hold on tenaciously. Even so, she was still injured. There were already 5 wounds on her body, and her white robe was dyed red with blood. Her long hair was draped over her shoulders, and her body was covered in blood. However, her expression was still firm and cold. She gritted her teeth and waved her sword without saying a word. She used all kinds of secret techniques to block Ghost Child's wild attacks. Suddenly, Ghost Child caught a flaw in her defense and decisively slashed out a few light blades with his sword. He waved his palm and shot out a ball of blood fire. Shohei was about to be hit by the light blades and blood fire. She was about to be injured. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing turned invisible and rushed to Ghost Child's side. He raised his left palm and released his trump card, God-slaying spear. Endless golden divine flames spewed out of his left palm and condensed into a 10-meter-long divine spear. Whoosh! The divine spear pierced through the night sky and disappeared in a flash. It carried the power to destroy everything and stabbed at Ghost Child. At such a close distance, the divine spear was as fast as the aurora. Ghost Child could not dodge it at all. Boom! With a muffled sound, the God-slaying spear pierced through Ghost Child's chest. The God-slaying spear carried a terrifying force and pushed Ghost Child back more than 10 miles. With a bang, he was nailed to a mountain peak. The extreme pain caused Ghost Child's face to contort as he roared and wailed miserably. Before he could break free, the God-slaying spear exploded again, turning into golden divine flames that covered the sky and earth. Boom! Suddenly, a ball of golden divine flames exploded and swept across the sky for dozens of miles. The entire mountain was blown to pieces and scattered in the night sky. It did not disappear for a long time. Ji Tianqing stood in the night sky and stared fiercely at the flying ashes in the sky. He released his divine sense to search for traces of Ghost Child. Although Ghost Child's figure had disappeared, he knew very well that Ghost Child was one of the 36 demon monarchs and would not die so easily. Shohei finally heaved a sigh of relief. He did not have time to check on his injuries and hurriedly flew to Ji Tianqing's side. "Master, have you taken care of the 3 blood gods?" Ji Tianqing did not speak. He just nodded silently. Shohei was shocked and encouraged. He looked around with sharp eyes and asked, "Is Ghost Child dead?" Before Ji Tianqing could reply, a sneer that sounded like a night owl rang out in the night sky behind the two of them. Her. Just the 2 of you reptiles also want to kill this sovereign? What wishful thinking." Chapter 1660. Hearing that vicious sneer, Ji Tianqing and Shohei turned their heads at the same time. They saw a black shadow floating in the night sky 1,000 feet behind them. A ball of black demon chi enveloped a giant more than 30 feet tall. That giant was Ghost Boy. His body was extremely strong and sturdy, and his face was particularly ferocious. On his chest and abdomen, there was a hole the size of a water tank. It was transparent from front to back, and his internal organs and bones could be seen clearly. There was no doubt that Ghost Boy could not withstand the terrifying power of the God-slaying spear. His chest was blown up, and he was seriously injured. However, his vitality was abnormally strong. Even though he was seriously injured, his physical body did not die. He tenaciously held on and stared at Ji Tianqing with resentment. His body was filled with powerful killing intent. Ji Tianqing looked at him with a solemn expression. He sent a voice transmission to Shohei. "Ghost Child is too strong. We must be careful. We can't rush things." Shohei nodded silently and replied, "I understand." After saying that, her figure quietly disappeared and hid in the darkness, waiting for an opportunity to move. Ji Tianqing faced Ghost Boy directly. His momentum was not weak at all. He sneered and said, "Ghost Boy, the taste of that spear just now is not bad, right? Ha, those 3 blood gods are already dead. You will soon follow in their footsteps and die with them." Ghost Boy frowned fiercely and stared at Ji Tianqing with a gloomy gaze. He shouted angrily, "Little bastard, I have indeed underestimated you. No wonder Lord Demon God said that you are the nemesis of the blood gods. However, I will kill you today no matter what and get rid of you." The death of the three blood gods was beyond Ghost Boy's expectations, but it also made him more determined to get rid of Ji Tianxing. He knew very well that if Ji Tianxing did not die, he could kill the almost immortal blood gods. This was a great threat to the revival of the demon race. As his voice fell, Ghost Boy's body bloomed with soaring blood flames and condensed into a pair of wings. He rushed toward Ji Tianxing as fast as an aurora. Heavenly Slaughter Ghost Blade. Ghost Child brandished his gigantic arms, wielding a black saber that was 100 feet long. He ruthlessly slashed at Ji Tianxing. Suddenly, a giant blade of black light that was hundreds of meters long descended from the sky, bursting with an aura that could destroy everything. The berserk saber chi enveloped the area, within a radius of dozens of kilometers. Space was also shackled by invisible shackles. Ji Tianxing only felt the pressure suddenly increase, making it difficult for him to move an inch. There was no way for him to dodge. At the critical moment, he hurriedly used the Kenshin battle robe to form a pair of golden wings to wrap himself up. Wings of the Golden Rock. Boom! Amidst the deafening noise, the giant blade of black light slashed at him, causing him to fall from the sky and crash into the ruins below. Plop! A deep pit was formed on the spot in the ruins that were covered with rubble and dust. Earth and rocks were splashed everywhere. Ji Tianxing fell to the bottom of the pit and struggled to get up. Fortunately, the golden wings blocked the power of the giant black blade. He got up unscathed, spread his wings and flew into the sky. Ghost Child charged over again. He waved his saber and slashed out 3 black lights that enveloped his figure. At this moment, Shohei finally made her move. She attacked Ghost Child from the side. She waved her sword and stabbed out more than a dozen icy blue sword lights that enveloped Ghost Child's figure. Even though Ghost Child had sent Ji Tianxing flying with his 3 beams of black light, Ji Tianxing was still in the air. However, the icy blue sword lights that Shohei used also stabbed Ghost Child, sending him flying back and crashing into a mountain peak more than 10 kilometers away. Shohei's strength was only 2 levels lower than Ghost Child's. It was enough to threaten his life. A few hideous wounds immediately appeared on Ghost Child's sturdy body, and black demonic blood splattered out. The intense pain caused Ghost Child to fly into a rage and let out a hysterical roar. He cursed angrily and brandished his saber, wanting to chase after Shohei. However, Shohei's attack was successful. She did not continue fighting and immediately hid in the darkness. At this moment, Ji Tianxing swung his sword again and slashed out a giant golden sword with all his might. Heaven-splitting sword. The dazzling giant golden sword erupted with a destructive might as it slashed at Ghost Child. Dazzling purple lightning coiled around the enormous sword, emitting crisp crackling sounds, and its might was shocking. Ghost Child did not dare to be negligent. He hurriedly brandished his saber and slashed out black lights to block the giant sword. Only a series of muffled pung 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 sounds could be heard as the huge golden sword was defeated on the spot. Several huge blades of black light were also shattered into pieces, filling the sky. Ji Tianxing's attack was easily neutralized by Ghost Child. Upon seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing frowned fiercely. He was somewhat anxious. Damn it! After all, I'm only at the 7th level of the Essence Soul Realm. Ghost Child's strength has reached the 6th level of the Tribulation Transcendence Realm. Other than the God-slaying spear, no matter what ultimate move I use, it's impossible for me to injure Ghost Child. The difference in strength between the two of them was a major realm. No matter how monstrous Ji Tianxing was, it was difficult for him to surpass it. Ghost Child pounced over again and launched a ferocious attack on him. All he could do was block and dodge as he was chased by Ghost Child. Only when Shohei took action could he threaten and injure Ghost Child. Both sides fought intensely in the night sky. It was difficult to tell who had the upper hand, and the situation was extremely critical. About 15 minutes later, the 3 of them had exchanged hundreds of blows. Ji Tianxing's golden wings had long been exhausted and retracted back into his body. His body was covered in injuries, and his clothes were tattered. His long hair was disheveled. Dark red blood dyed his long robe, making him look particularly miserable. Shohei's injuries had also worsened. His massive body was covered in bloody holes and wounds. Most of those injuries were caused by Shohei. Shohei's situation was not optimistic either. There were more than 10 new wounds on his body, and his body was stained with blood. Ji Tianxing was secretly anxious as he silently calculated. If this continues, I won't be able to do a thing to Ghost Child even if I join forces with Shohei. At most, I'll be able to tie with him. If Ji Bai can participate in the battle, the situation will definitely be much better, right? Thinking of this, he released his consciousness into the sword world to investigate Ji Bai's situation. Ji Bai was still recuperating in the secret room of peaceful Soil City, still in a deep sleep. Ji Tianxing was about to call out to Ji Bai when Ghost Child suddenly roared. You two little reptiles, are you at your wits' end? Are you using the same moves over and over again? Since you only have this bit of ability, then you can die. As he spoke, Ghost Child released an earth-shattering black light that condensed into a mountain-like giant palm and fiercely slapped towards Ji Tianxing. Demonic palm. Little bastard, go to hell. The pitch-black demonic palm carried with it the power to destroy the heavens and earth as it descended from the sky. An invisible majestic power enveloped Ji Tianxing, suppressing him to the point where he could not move an inch. His body was also bent. He gritted his teeth and endured, erupting with all his strength in an attempt to break free. However, his struggle was futile. Bang! Chapter 1661. Boom! An earth-shattering boom exploded, reverberating fiercely in the sky. The mountain-like heavenly demon palm slapped Ji Tianxing into the ground. A deep pit with a radius of 100 miles appeared on the ground, and dust splattered everywhere. The ground within a radius of a few hundred miles trembled crazily, and densely packed ravines appeared. Ji Tianxing was buried in the ruins at the bottom of the pit, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. What was even stranger was that the mountain-like heavenly demon palm did not dissipate. Instead, it turned into a light shield with a radius of 100 miles and sealed the huge pit. The pitch-black light shield emitted a cold aura of death. It was so powerful that it made one's heart palpitate. Shohei witnessed this scene with her own eyes, and her expression changed drastically, revealing a look of deep worry. No, nothing must happen to Master. In her extreme anxiety, she rushed to the huge pit as fast as lightning and slashed at the pitch-black light shield, wanting to save Ji Tianxing. Boom! Bang! 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 In just 2 short breaths, she slashed out dozens of times. The power of each sword was enough to split mountains and rivers and destroy everything within a radius of hundreds of miles. However, the pitch-black light shield was very sturdy and did not shatter. The power of the icy blue giant sword was absorbed by the pitch-black light shield. Ghost Child did not stop her. He looked down at Shohei from above, and a cruel sneer appeared on his face. You want to save Ji Tianxing? This bit of power is not enough. Use your ultimate move. Shohei immediately frowned and realized that the situation was not good. She glanced at Ghost Child and carefully observed the pitch-black light shield. Only then did she see some clues. It turned out that the pitch-black light shield could absorb the power of the sword light and become even more powerful. In a moment of desperation, she slashed dozens of times and actually increased the power of the light shield. This was equivalent to putting pressure on Ji Tianxing and helping Ghost Child in disguise. You disgusting monster, you're really despicable and vicious. Shohei stared coldly at Ghost Child and cursed angrily. Ghost Child laughed even more proudly and said in a contemptuous tone, Hee hee, you idiot, don't you think it's too late to see the problem now? As he sneered, he waved his pitch-black saber and charged at Shohei. Shohei could only brandish his treasured sword and use his ultimate sword technique to fight against Ghost Child. The two of them fought fiercely in the sky. Their silhouettes flashed continuously, sometimes to the east and sometimes to the west. All kinds of powerful spells fiercely collided in the sky, exploding with deafening sounds and dazzling lights. At the same time, Ji Tianxing was crawling out of the ruins from within the pitch-black light barrier. His body was already twisted and deformed. More than 30 bones in his body were broken, and his chest was deeply sunken. Dark red bloodstains covered his entire body, drenching his robes completely. A thick layer of dust and dirt covered his body, turning him into a dark red clay figure. His complexion was extremely unsightly. Blood kept flowing out of his nose and mouth, and his footsteps were very unsteady. He staggered and could fall at any time. The heavenly fiend palm that Ghost Child used was too powerful, causing him to suffer heavy injuries. Fortunately, his physical body was strong enough to withstand this palm and not be destroyed. If it were any other Essence Soul Realm warrior, they would have been killed by the heavenly fiend palm on the spot. Their physical body and essence soul would have been destroyed. Cough cough. Ji Tianxing stood in the ruins with disheveled hair. When he opened his mouth to cough, blood kept flowing out of his mouth. At this moment, the pitch-black light barrier emitted a powerful force that suppressed him ruthlessly. There were also endless blood-red flames, pitch-black demonic chi, and light blades that descended from the sky. Without a doubt, the pitch-black light barrier formed by the heavenly fiend palm was a domain-like array. Ji Tianxing was sealed in the array, and had to endure the suppression and attacks of the array until he lost his life. However, he was already seriously injured, and his dermic powers were extremely weak. He was unable to resist at all. Moreover, he had already used up all his trump cards. Soon, the blood flames and light blades that filled the sky were about to drown him. At this critical moment, he suddenly remembered that there was still a divine cauldron sealed in his mind. The Heavenly Dipper Divine Fire Cauldron. Back in the Tianxian continent, during the decisive battle between the human race and the demonic army, he controlled this divine cauldron to release heavenly fire and astral winds that slaughtered millions of demons. Therefore, he did not hesitate to use this divine cauldron. Swoosh! With a flash of light, the Heavenly Dipper Godly Fire Cauldron appeared above the ruins and instantly expanded to a radius of 30 meters. As soon as Ji Tianxing entered the divine cauldron, the blood flames and light blades that filled the sky drowned the Heavenly Dipper Godly Fire Cauldron. Boom boom boom. A series of muffled sounds echoed violently in the light barrier. The ruins within a radius of 100 miles had been scorched by the blood flames, and then shattered into pieces by the light blades. Fortunately, the Heavenly Dipper Godly Fire Cauldron blocked the blood flames and light blades. Ji Tianxing hid in the divine cauldron and was safe and sound. The Imperial Court's divine cauldron is indeed a top essence soul dharma treasure. Even if Ghost Child's array is at the calamity level, the divine cauldron should be able to hold on for some time. I have to recuperate as soon as possible and recover as much strength as possible before the divine cauldron is destroyed. Therefore, he hid in the divine cauldron's dharma treasure space and took out 3 pills from his interspatial ring and consumed them. The 3 pills were the calamity-level pills that Hong Qingtian had given him. One could heal his physical injuries, one could heal his soul, and one could quickly recover his dermic powers. After consuming the pills, Ji Tianxing hurriedly circulated his energy to refine the medicinal essence and quickly recuperate from his injuries. The Dharma treasure space was pitch black as time slowly passed. Ji Tianxing focused on circulating his energy and immersed himself in an extremely focused state. About an hour later, the power of the 3 tribulation-level pills was fully unleashed, and his injuries were stabilized. At that moment, he suddenly realized that the bottleneck that had been shackling him had loosened. His empty dermic powers surged crazily as his essence, soul, and body underwent subtle changes. They were rapidly strengthening. This discovery jolted him awake, and he was secretly pleasantly surprised. That's great. I've been stuck at the peak of the 7th level essence soul realm all this while. No matter how much I cultivated in seclusion, I was unable to break through to the 8th level essence soul realm. The bloody battle just now stimulated my potential at the brink of life and death. I can actually break through the bottleneck now. The ancients didn't lie to me. Indeed, only in the midst of life and death can one find an opportunity to break through and increase one's strength faster. These thoughts flashed through his mind as he no longer cared about recuperating from his injuries. He immediately circulated his energy to break through the bottleneck. 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes passed. His body shimmered with a hazy golden light as he fluctuated with a powerful aura. His strength was rapidly increasing. Outside the divine cauldron, the pitch-black barrier's power was constantly increasing. It constantly released powerful attacks that bombarded the heavenly astral godfire cauldron. The divine cauldron's surface dimmed as cracks gradually appeared on the cauldron's body. Its power was also rapidly declining. Clearly, the power of this great formation was too strong. Chapter 1662. Unknowingly, another hour had passed. The heavenly dipper godfire cauldron had already turned dim. Its surface was covered in cracks and holes. Endless sanguine flames, light blades, and fiendish aura poured down like a torrential flood, bombarding the divine cauldron wantonly. Boom! 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 Finally, the heavenly dipper godfire cauldron could no longer withstand the onslaught. A huge crack appeared on the cauldron's body. The crack penetrated the entire divine cauldron, nearly splitting it into two. The next instant, more than 10 black pillars of light descended from the night sky and bombarded the cauldron. At that moment, the divine cauldron lit up with a dazzling golden light as it emitted powerful dermic powers. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing, who was covered in blood, charged out of the divine cauldron with a dazzling golden light wrapped around him. He had finally broken through the bottleneck and successfully reached the 8th firmament essence soul realm. His clothes were tattered and his hair was disheveled, making him look especially wretched. However, his injuries had already recovered by more than half. His dermic powers and essence soul had reached their peak as he exuded a powerful aura. After breaking through to the 8th firmament essence soul realm, his strength had increased by 3 times. Seeing more than 10 pillars of light come crashing down, his figure flashed and teleported 5 kilometers away, narrowly avoiding them. Boom! More than 10 pillars of fiendish aura billowed as they struck the heavenly dipper godfire cauldron. Amidst a deafening boom, the divine cauldron crumbled on the spot, turning into fragments that splattered everywhere. Ji Tianxing stood in the night sky as he looked at the crumbling fragments of the divine cauldron. He muttered to himself, using a divine cauldron in exchange for an opportunity to break through. It's worth it. Although the destruction of the heavenly dipper godfire cauldron pained him, he had managed to break through the protection of the divine cauldron. Furthermore, he had recovered from his injuries and strength by using the divine cauldron's protection. At such a critical juncture, this was no doubt something to be thankful for. Ji Tianxing looked up at the pitch-black barrier of light as his eyes revealed a cold glint. Burial of Heaven, lend me a hand. His right hand flashed as the sword of Burial of Heaven appeared. Then, a golden light burst out from behind him as he summoned his 1,000-foot-long golden sword. The sword of Burial of Heaven also expanded several thousand times, turning into a pitch-black giant sword that was 3,000 meters tall, exuding an ancient and vigorous aura. Shwa! With a flash of light, the Burial of Heaven and the primordial spirit golden sword merged. Ji Tianxing also turned into a dazzling golden light and became one with the giant sword. Under the enhancement of him and the sword of Burial of Heaven, the golden sword of primordial spirit had a darker color, and its power had increased by 8 times. Open! Ji Tianxing's angry roar came from the giant sword. The giant sword radiated a holy and dazzling golden light. Like a golden flame, it shot toward the pitch-black sky. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion erupted, shaking the entire universe. The giant sword pierced through the pitch-black light barrier, creating a huge hole in it. Ji Tianxing and Burial of Heaven joined forces and successfully broke through the seal of the Great Array, rushing out of the pitch-black light barrier. Whoosh! The 1,000-foot-long giant sword flew into the night sky and quickly separated. Ji Tianxing appeared and retracted the primordial spirit golden sword into his body. The sword of Burial of Heaven also returned to its normal size and landed in his palm. On the ground, the demonic array that was 100 miles in radius immediately collapsed. Ji Tianxing looked around, searching for traces of Shohei and Ghost Child. Soon he saw that a few hundred miles to the north, the night sky was constantly shining with dazzling light. He hurriedly flew over. After a few dozen breaths, he approached the area where the light was shining and gradually saw the situation. Shohei and Ghost Child were still fighting fiercely in the sky. However, The two of them had consumed more than half of their magic power, and their strength was very weak. Ghost Child's injuries were even more severe. His 100-feet-tall body seemed to have been cut into pieces. There was not a single piece of intact flesh on his body. He was covered in crisscrossing wounds. Even so, his body was not destroyed, and he could still continue fighting. Shohei's injuries were extremely miserable. His entire body was covered in wounds and bloody holes, and he was completely covered in blood. Half of her body had even been corroded by demonic chi. Her flesh and blood had completely rotted, revealing her eerie white bones. Even though her body was on the verge of destruction, she still relied on her strong will and faith to stubbornly hold on. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing's heart was extremely heavy, and monstrous killing intent accumulated in his chest. Ghost Child, die! He roared with murderous intent, and suddenly opened the divine eye on his forehead. Divine lightning! The golden divine eye released endless divine lightning, condensing into a 100-feet-long pillar of lightning that fiercely blasted at Ghost Child. Ghost Child was not prepared for his appearance, and was immediately hit by the divine lightning pillar. Boom! Amidst a deafening explosion, the divine lightning pillar drowned Ghost Child's figure. His 100-feet-tall body could no longer withstand such destructive power, and collapsed on the spot. His body exploded, turning into thousands of pieces of charred flesh and blood that scattered in all directions. A pitch-black primordial spirit flew out from the flesh and blood that blotted out the sky. The primordial spirit was about a meter tall, and flickered with black light. It was Ghost Child's original appearance. He stood in the night sky and stared at Ji Tianqing in shock. He was so shocked that he could not speak. The incomparable shock made him forget his anger for a moment. How did you escape unscathed? The Heavenly Demon Palm was Ghost Child's ultimate trump card, and it was extremely powerful. He was certain that even if the Heavenly Demon Palm did not kill Ji Tianqing, the formation could kill Ji Tianqing, and even destroy his primordial spirit. But now, Ji Tianqing had come out safe and sound, and his strength had increased threefold. How could Ghost Child believe this? Even if he saw it with his own eyes, he could not accept this fact. It was too unbelievable, too heaven-defying. Shohei had been worried about Ji Tianqing, and her heart was burning with worry. She had only been able to hold on until now, because of her strong willpower and stubborn belief. No matter what, she had to defeat Ghost Child, and return to rescue Ji Tianqing. However, she never expected that Ji Tianqing would appear before her battle with Ghost Child ended. Furthermore, not only had Ji Tianqing recovered from his injuries, but his strength had also broken through to the 8th level of the Essence Soul Realm. Shohei was also petrified on the spot. She was dumbfounded. How is this possible? This is a miracle. No, this is definitely a miracle. Shohei looked at Ji Tianqing with a burning gaze, and muttered absent-mindedly. At the same time, Ji Tianqing took advantage of Ghost Child's daze, to use another ultimate move. White Tiger Sacred Sword. His entire body ignited with golden flames that soared into the sky. He merged with the Burial of Heaven sword, and turned into a 1,000-foot-long sword that stabbed towards Ghost Child. The giant sword emitted a dazzling golden light, and condensed into a mountain-sized white tiger phantom. Boom! In the next instant, the White Tiger Sacred Sword stabbed into Ghost Child's primordial spirit, producing a dull sound. Ghost Child's primordial spirit was sent flying, and tumbled into the night sky 5 kilometers away. Chapter 1663. After all, Ghost Child was a powerhouse at the 6th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. Even if his physical body was destroyed, and only his primordial spirit was left, his strength was still powerful. The shock and impact that Ji Tianqing brought to him was too great, reaching a terrifying level. He didn't dare to tangle with him anymore, and tried his best to escape to the north. Ji Tianqing chased after him for thousands of miles, but he couldn't catch up to him. Ji Tianqing had no choice but to give up the chase, and turn around to return to the battlefield. In the desolate ruins, Shohei sat on the ground with her face covered in blood. Her ice-blue sword was stabbed into the soil beside her. Her body trembled as she panted violently. She was no longer able to fight. There was nothing she could do. Her magic power had been exhausted, and her injuries were too serious. Her entire body was covered in wounds and holes. Half of her flesh and blood had been corroded by the demonic aura, leaving only her bones. Even so, she endured unimaginable pain. She gritted her teeth and didn't make a sound. Ji Tianqing looked at her miserable appearance and felt his heart ache. He quickly landed beside her. Seeing that he had returned, Shohei hurriedly leaned on her sword and wanted to stand up to salute him. Ji Tianqing quickly waved his hand and asked her to sit down. He said in a heavy tone, "Shohei, don't move. I'll help you heal your injuries now." Shohei didn't say anything. She took out a pitch-black ring and handed it to him. Ji Tianqing saw that the ring was engraved with ghost patterns and emitted cold demonic aura. He asked, "Is this ghost child's interspatial ring? You found it among the pieces of flesh and blood?" Shohei nodded and said in a low and hoarse voice, "I have never forgotten that we are here to snatch the divine dragon's blood." Ji Tianqing silently accepted the interspatial ring and activated the power of the heaven-mending pearl. He released a dense holy white light that enveloped Shohei. The holy white light quickly purified the demonic aura on her body, alleviating her pain. In just 10 breaths, the demonic aura in her body was completely removed. Ji Tianqing retracted the white light and released the dark greenwood magic power to treat her wounds. The greenwood dharma power contained a vast amount of life force. It quickly healed her wounds and grew new flesh and skin. After about an hour, half of Shohei's body grew flesh and blood, covering his white bones. Only then did Ji Tianqing stop. He took out a few pills and handed them to Shohei. "Shohei, thank you for saving me. If it weren't for you holding back Ghost Child, I wouldn't have survived until now, much less have a breakthrough." Ji Tianqing looked at her with a gentle gaze and thanked her sincerely. Shohei accepted his pills and lowered his head weakly. His voice was hoarse as he said, "Master, you're exaggerating. Protecting you is my and Jibai's mission. Shohei, your mission is complete. Go and recuperate in peace." Ji Tianqing exhorted as he put her into the sword world and settled her down in the secret chamber. Then, he turned and left the ruins, his figure disappearing into the night sky. At daybreak, Ji Tianqing left the battlefield. He appeared tens of thousands of miles away, hiding in a desolate mountain range. Deep underground, he dug out a temporary stone room and set up a formation. After he was ready, he took out 4 space rings. 3 of the space rings belonged to Huakue, the black-armored man, and the skinny man. The 3 of them had been killed, so the soul imprints on the rings had naturally dissipated. They had become ownerless items. Ji Tianqing opened the 3 rings one by one and roughly checked them. The space in the rings wasn't big. There were hundreds of thousands of spirit stones, and more than 400 primordial soul-level pills. Other than that, there were dozens of primordial soul-level magic treasures, and a large number of miscellaneous items. Those strange items were basically obtained by the 3 of them when they were adventuring. He didn't know what they were used for. The only useful things were the 2 topographic maps of the ruins of God. Ji Tianqing put the spirit stones, pills, and magic treasures into his ring and sighed with disdain. Those 3 fellows are really poor to the point of being pathetic. No wonder they rob other than adventuring. They're really vicious. After saying that, he picked up the last black ghost-patterned ring. This was Ghost Boy's space ring. The soul imprint on it was still there. Ji Tianqing studied it for a long time and used several methods to remove Ghost Boy's soul imprint. He opened the space ring and carefully checked the items inside. The space in the ring was very big. All kinds of gems, pills, and materials were piled up like mountains. However, those cultivation resources were used by the devil race. Their attributes were completely different from that of the human race. Even if those resources were priceless, they could only be used by the devil race. To Ji Tianqing, they were all trash. The only thing he was concerned about was a square black treasure box. The treasure box was made of meteoric iron and set up with a tribulation-level formation. It faintly emitted traces of divine power. This should be it. Ji Tianqing took out the black treasure box and carefully observed it for a long time before he started to crack the formation on the treasure box. After 2 days, he finally cracked the formation on the treasure box and successfully opened it. The moment the lid was lifted, a dazzling 7-colored light shone, illuminating the entire stone room. Boundless divine energy surged out of the treasure box, causing Ji Tianxing's blood and qi to roil, and stars to appear in his eyes. He tried his best to remain calm, and looked into the treasure box. He saw a fist-sized gem inside. It was a diamond-shaped gem. It was like the most dazzling 7-colored diamond, reflecting a gorgeous brilliance. The gem was sparkling and translucent. It was so pure that it didn't have any impurities. Ji Tianxing stared at the 7-colored gem and frowned. His expression was a little strange. It's not divine dragon blood but a gem? He finally understood that the so-called divine dragon blood was just Hukuei's guess. The divine item that Ghost Boy had obtained from Mount Fulong was this 7-colored divine stone. The divine items that appear in Mount Fulong are most likely related to the ancient divine dragon. They're either dragon bones or dragon blood. Why is it a 7-colored divine stone? Could it be that the ancient divine dragon's corpse turned into Mount Fulong, and the entire mountain's divine power gathered together to form this divine stone? Ji Tianxing furrowed his brows as he pondered. The divine power in the divine stone is so boundless. If I can refine it, even if I only absorb 1% of it, it'll be greatly beneficial. Just as this thought popped up in his head, Burial of Heaven's voice rang out in his head. Tianxing, that's not a divine stone. It's a divine dragon crystal core, commonly known as a dragon crystal. Dragon crystal? Ji Tianxing was momentarily stunned, then came to a realization. So that's how it is. Mount Fulong, ancient divine dragon crystal. That explains it. Burial of Heaven. Do you have any secret techniques that can help me refine this dragon crystal and absorb its divine power? Burial of Heaven replied concisely. This dragon crystal is useless to you. Apart from the dragon race, no one can refine or devour it. Chapter 1664. Although it sounds pitiful, it is the truth. Burial of Heaven calmly added. Ji Tianxing's heart ached even more. He bitterly smiled and said, "Damn it! I was just thinking that if I could refine this dragon crystal, I would definitely reach the tribulation transcendence realm." Sigh. The little black dragon got lucky. This guy is really lucky to follow me. Burial of Heaven did not comment on this. He only calmly reminded, the origin of that dragon crystal is very complicated. I'm afraid the little black dragon will not be able to refine it in a short period of time. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, how is it complicated? Tell me about it. Burial of Heaven explained, in my opinion, that is not the dragon crystal of an ancient divine dragon. After the ancient divine dragon died, its corpse turned into a mountain range, and its divine power spread throughout the entire mountain range. After tens of thousands of years, the divine power gradually gathered and combined with the mineral vein and the essence of the sun and moon, finally condensing into this dragon crystal. A true dragon crystal has a soul and life. It also contains the bloodline inheritance of the divine dragon. And the dragon crystal in your hand is formed by heaven and earth. Its essence is more like a gem. Ji Tianxing immediately understood. He nodded and said, amazing. You can even analyze all these things? How does the little black dragon swallow it to quickly refine it? Burial of Heaven calmly said, it has to rely on itself. No one can help it. All right. Ji Tianxing nodded. He entered Burial of Heaven's sword and went to the sword world to find the little black dragon. Not long after, he flew above the 5 elements pool and sent a message to the little black dragon. A moment later, a huge black shadow appeared under the water. The pool water stirred up turbulent waves. Splash! The black dragon broke out of the water. Its 3,000 feet long black body flew into the sky and arrived in front of Ji Tianxing. Old Ji, why are you looking for me? Ji Tianxing didn't beat around the bush. He took out the dragon crystal and handed it to it. He smiled and said, you're lucky. I risked my life to get this dragon crystal. I'll give it to you. The black dragon stared at the dragon crystal and sized it up. Suddenly, a bright light flashed in his eyes, revealing a look of deep shock. Old Ji, you You actually managed to snatch a divine dragon's dragon crystal? Well, are you surprised? Ji Tianxing nodded and looked at it with a smile. This is incredible, the black dragon exclaimed in excitement. It circled around Ji Tianxing a few times and created a hurricane. After a long while, it finally calmed down and swallowed the dragon crystal. Ji Tianxing kindly reminded him. That thing is not a real dragon crystal. It's just a gem condensed by the power of the dragon god. If you swallow it just like that, be careful not to choke. Don't worry, it won't happen. The black dragon shook its head happily and said to Ji Tianxing, Old Ji, thank you so much. This is the biggest opportunity in my life. After I refine the dragon crystal, I'll definitely become a divine dragon in the martial god realm. Even if I can't, I'll still reach the saint realm. At that time, I'll be able to protect you and help you achieve all your wishes and goals. Ji Tianxing smiled and patted its head. He said, It's good that you have this intention. By the time you reach the saint realm, I'll have already become a martial saint. He chatted with the black dragon for a while, then left the sword world and returned to the dark stone room. Next, he went into seclusion to cultivate for another 2 days. After 2 days of recuperation, his injuries were completely healed, and his strength had also returned to its peak state. On the morning of the 3rd day, a spiritual light flew from the sky and landed in Ji Tianxing's hand. It was a communication jade slip sent by the Great Protector. Ji Tianxing's divine sense entered the jade slip, and the Great Guardian's voice sounded in his mind. Tianxing, we've already entered the ruins of God. In 2 days, we'll meet at the Crescent Moon Lake in the northeast. We'll be waiting for you. Ji Tianxing put away the jade slip and took out a map of the ruins of God from his ring. He carefully examined it. This map belonged to the Wuxia and countless places were marked on it. There were also notes in many places, indicating what dangers there were. After all, the Wuxia trio had been adventurers for hundreds of years and had always been active in the ruins of God. They were very familiar with the ruins of God. The ruins of God's terrain was mostly barren mountain ranges, canyons, and ravines. There were very few rivers and lakes. Ji Tianxing quickly found the Crescent Moon Lake and confirmed his location. The Crescent Moon Lake was about 100,000 kilometers to the east. Thus, he hurriedly left the stone room and rushed to the east as fast as lightning. A day later, he smoothly arrived at the Crescent Moon Lake. The Crescent Moon Lake wasn't big. It only had a radius of 150 kilometers. It was like a pale green crescent moon lying quietly among the mountains. Ji Tianxing found a secluded place by the Crescent Moon Lake and meditated to recover his dermic powers while waiting for the Great Guardian to arrive. The next morning, a stream of light flew over from the horizon and stopped above the Crescent Moon Lake. After the light faded, a 30-zhonglong silver flying ship appeared. This flying ship was a high-grade tribulation-level dermic treasure. It was very exquisite and had the emblem of the vast divine kingdom engraved on it. Whoosh! With a flash of light, the purple-robed Great Guardian walked out of the flying ship and stood in the sky looking down. Ji Tianxing sensed the arrival of the flying ship and ended his meditation. He flew into the sky and arrived in front of the Great Guardian. After the two of them met, the Great Guardian sized him up with a complicated gaze. Immediately, his pupils constricted, and he revealed an expression of disbelief. Tianxing, you've actually reached the 8th level of the primordial spirit realm? It's only been a month since we last met. How did you break through again? The Great Guardian looked at him in disbelief. His expression and eyes were filled with amazement. Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded. He explained in a reserved manner. I was just lucky to encounter an opportunity. Great Guardian, you don't have to make a fuss over it. I really can't see through you anymore. The Great Guardian sighed with a gratified smile on his face. The faster Ji Tianxing grew, the better it would be for him and the vast divine kingdom. He was happy to see this happen. Let's go. The Great Guardian calmed down and led him into the flying ship. Whoosh! The two of them entered the flying ship and appeared in a spacious and bright hall. Ji Tianxing originally thought that the other 4 god disciples would be cultivating in their own rooms. He did not expect Qin Sangxiong, Song Zhanyu, Wuxia and Jiang Mingxue to be waiting for him in the hall. The four of them stared at him with different expressions. Young Master Ji, you're finally here. Did you encounter any danger in the ruins of God? Wuxia was the first to come forward. He greeted Ji Tianqing with a smile. His eyes were filled with concern. When he saw Ji Tianqing's cultivation level clearly, he stopped in his tracks and widened his eyes in shock. Young Master Ji, aren't you at the 7th level of the primordial spirit realm? How did you become the 8th level of the primordial spirit realm? Did you break through again? Wuxia looked as though he had seen a ghost. He was completely stunned on the spot. Qin Songxiong, Song Zhanyu and Jiang Mingxue only noticed Ji Tianqing's cultivation level when they heard Yin Wuxia's exclamation. Chapter 1665. The hall was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. The four gods' disciples stared at Ji Tianqing without blinking. They even forgot to breathe. After a long while, they came back to their senses and looked shocked. You are really a freak. In just 3 months, you managed to level up by 2 cultivation levels. Qin Songxiong was a man of few words. Even he could not help but exclaim. The way he looked at Ji Tianqing was filled with surprise and envy. Before he met Ji Tianqing, he thought highly of himself and looked down on all the geniuses from different countries. However, Ji Tianqing made him taste the taste of failure. Ji Tianqing's speed of advancement made him gasp in amazement, and he was beaten black and blue all over. Song Zhanyu shook his head and exclaimed, "That's impossible. That's impossible. Even the #1 genius in the world could not create such a miracle. I understand now. It must be the little prince who brought him to the kingdom of God and rewarded him with the elixir. Yes, that must be it." Song Zhanyu had seen how powerful Ji Tianqing was. However, he still could not accept that Ji Tianqing was so powerful. Therefore, he believed that Jiu must have given Ji Tianqing some kind of elixir to help him level up by 1 cultivation level. Yin Wuxia's reaction was still calm. Other than excitement, he was also happy for Ji Tianqing. However, Jiang Mingxue's expression and emotions were the most complicated among all of them. She did not speak but looked at Ji Tianqing in a daze. She was in a daze for a long time with mixed feelings in her heart. The more time she spent with Ji Tianqing, the more she understood how powerful Ji Tianqing was. She felt that she was getting further and further away from Ji Tianqing. No matter how hard she worked, it was impossible for her to catch up with Ji Tianqing. She would only be left further and further behind. This was because she was not on the same level as Ji Tianqing. A moment later, the head protector said, "Everyone, we will arrive at the ancient gazing platform in 1 day's journey. I hope that everyone can properly regulate their breathing and conserve their energy, so that they can perform well at the exchange. Even if no one can obtain the favor of the old man of the ruins of God, I hope that everyone will not weaken the prestige of the divine nations and be defeated by the other divine nations." Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood. Then he walked out of the hall and found an empty room to meditate. Qin Songxiong, Song Zhanyu, and the others looked at his back and pondered for a long time with complicated expressions before they left. The flying boat streaked across the sky like a stream of light, crossing thousands of mountains and rivers. 1 day later, in the evening, the flying boat finally arrived at its destination. 100 miles ahead, above the endless mountain range, there was a huge stone platform floating in the air. It was a huge rock with a radius of 10 miles. It was beige in color and was not an ordinary rock. Instead, it was some kind of spiritual jade. Although the sky was covered with gray clouds, the light was dim. However, the stone platform was shining with a pure white brilliance, like a bright moon hanging in the sky. On the side of the boulder, 2 ancient black characters were engraved. Ancient gazing. There was a circle of stone railings on the stone platform. In the middle of the stone platform stood a black stone tablet that was 1,000 feet tall. The entire stone platform looked very mysterious and exuded an ancient and majestic aura. When Ji Tianqing saw the ancient gazing platform, he immediately recalled that there was a similar stone platform in the eastern sea's returning ruins. It was called the 9th Heaven Platform. The ancient gazing platform and the 9th Heaven Platform are somewhat similar. I wonder if the two are related. Just as this thought flashed across his mind, the flying boat had already arrived above the ancient gazing platform. Swoosh! There was a flash of light, and the great guardian kept the flying boat. He Ji Tianxing, and the others appeared in the sky. Everyone looked down at the ancient gazing platform, and saw that in the southwest corner, there were 6 outstanding experts with extraordinary auras sitting there. Among the 6 people, the leader was a white-haired elder in a purple robe. This person's body was as thin as a bamboo pole. His face was cold, and he exuded an intimidating aura. The other 5 experts were all young warriors in the primordial soul realm. There were 3 men and 2 women. The great guardian looked at the white-haired elder, and transmitted his voice to Ji Tianxing and the others. That is Guardian Yen from the Heaven End Holy Nation. He is a famous veteran martial sage, who has been famous for more than 2,000 years. The other 5 young men are all elite god disciples from the Heaven End Holy Nation. The Heaven End Holy Nation is the closest to the returning ruins, so they are always the first to arrive. Let's go over and say hello to them. Then, everyone landed on the ancient gazing platform. The great guardian led everyone toward Guardian Yen. Guardian Yen, how have you been? The great guardian cupped his hands and greeted Guardian Yen calmly. Ji Tianxing and the others followed suit and greeted in unison. Greetings, Guardian Yen. Protector Yin looked at the great protector indifferently. He also clasped his hands and bowed. Greetings. The 5 god disciples from the Heaven End Holy Nation also stood up and greeted the great guardian. Greetings, great guardian. After that, the great guardian and Guardian Yen exchanged some pleasantries. Both of them were secretly observing each other's god's disciples. Ji Tianxing and the god disciples from the Heaven End Holy Nation were sizing each other up, but no one spoke. After a while, Guardian Yen and the great guardian finished their greetings and separated. The great guardian led Ji Tianxing and the others to the southeast corner of the platform and sat down. On the surface, it seemed that the 12 experts from the 2 holy nations were meditating with their eyes closed. However, in reality, everyone was secretly discussing the god's disciples through telepathy. The great guardian's tone was solemn. He transmitted his voice to Ji Tianxing and the others. The Heaven and Holy Nation's strength and heritage have always been the strongest among the 3 holy nations. In the past few thousand years, the peerless geniuses who were qualified to enter the returning ruins were mostly from the Heaven End Holy Nation. This time, the 5 god disciples that Guardian Yen brought are all at the 7th level of the primordial spirit realm. Overall, they are stronger than us. Song Zhanyu added, that's right. I think the god disciples from the Heaven End Holy Nation are all arrogant and cold. 4 of them have reached the 7th level of the primordial spirit realm. The strongest among them, the yellow-robed youth, has also reached the 8th level of the primordial spirit realm. Enwuk thought for a while and transmitted his voice. Although the people from the Heaven End Holy Nation are very strong, we are only having a martial arts exchange, not an arena competition. If we really want to compare, Mr. G is also at the 8th level of the primordial spirit realm. He is much stronger than the people from the Heaven End Holy Nation. Qin Songqiong and Jiang Ningxue remained silent and did not express their opinions. Ji Tianxing, on the other hand, had an indifferent expression and would occasionally glance at the eastern sky. The great guardian looked at him and saw that he was absent-minded, as if he was waiting for something. He transmitted his voice to him. Tianxing, what do you think? Ji Tianxing shook his head and said indifferently, I don't have any opinions. Since it is an exchange, we should all express our opinions and let nature take its course. If it is an arena competition, it will be much simpler. We will definitely be able to win. Chapter 1666. The Great Guardian, Qin Songqiong, and the rest understood what Ji Tianxing meant. If it was a martial arts competition in the arena, a fight between real swords and real sabers would be decided based on strength. Ji Tianxing was confident that he could defeat all the gods' disciples from the other 2 holy nations and win glory for the Taihao holy nation. Unfortunately, it was not a fight in the arena, but an exchange meeting. For the gods' disciples, it did not matter who won or lost. Even if someone was stronger than others, it was only temporary. There were many coincidental factors. Maybe the person was older and had cultivated for 10 more years. Or maybe he had a fortuitous encounter. What would decide everyone's fate, and what level they could reach in the future would depend on their talent, aptitude, comprehension, and experience. The gods' disciples who could come to the ancient viewing platform were the top geniuses of their respective holy nations. Therefore, every holy nation exchange meeting focused on communication. The gods' disciples could learn from each other and broaden their horizons. Seeing that Ji Tianxing did not want to say more, the great guardian did not ask further. He said to the rest, "Everyone sit down and meditate. When the people from the Luoshui holy nation arrive, the exchange meeting will begin." Qin Songqiong, Song Zhanyu, and the rest nodded silently and closed their eyes to meditate. Ji Tianxing glanced at the 5 Heaven's End disciples and then closed his eyes to rest. In his opinion, although the 5 gods' disciples were outstanding, there was nothing special about them, and they were not worth his attention. There was only one thing on his mind. When would the people from the Luoshui holy nation arrive? Would Yin Yao come to the ancient viewing platform? Unknowingly, a whole night had passed. The white ancient viewing platform blossomed with white light in the pitch-black night, like a huge pearl. The people from the Taihao holy nation and the Heaven's End holy nation were meditating quietly and did not talk to each other. It was not until the next morning when the sun rose that a Heaven's End disciple spoke. "Look, are the people from the Luoshui holy nation here?" The blue-robed young man looked to the east and pointed at a stream of light in the sky. Guardian Yen and the other disciples of Heaven's End opened their eyes and looked at the sky in the east. The great guardian of Dharma, Ji Tianxing, and the others were also awakened. They stopped regulating their breathing and looked up at the sky. An icy blue stream of light sped over from the east. In just 10 breaths of time, the icy blue brilliance arrived above the ancient gazing platform. As the light faded, a 10-meter-long ice blue flying boat appeared. Under everyone's gaze, the flying boat was put away and disappeared. 6 martial arts experts appeared in the air in front of everyone. Among the 6 powerhouses, the leader was a middle-aged woman in a blue robe with a graceful and luxurious temperament. She looked like she was in her 40s. She had the charm of a 30-year-old woman and the gentleness and kindness of a 50-year-old woman. Behind her stood 5 Essence Soul Realm young geniuses. There were 3 women and 2 young men. Without a doubt, these 5 geniuses were the gods' disciples of the Luoshui divine nation. The people from the vast divine nation and the heaven extinction divine nation were sizing up the middle-aged woman and the 5 god disciples. However, everyone's gazes ultimately landed on a woman in a white dress. It was a woman in her early 20s, wearing a long white dress. She stood beside the middle-aged woman. Obviously, she was the genius with the highest status among the 5 god disciples. Everyone stared at her without blinking. Regardless of whether they were men or women, they were all stunned, and their eyes were filled with admiration. This was because the white dress girl was too beautiful. What a peerless beauty, a beauty capable of causing the downfall of nations. She wore a white dress embroidered with stars and ripples. Her collar and cuffs were embroidered with gold, which made her look exceptionally exquisite and gorgeous. Her tall and slender figure showed off her perfect curves under her loose white robe. On her fair and charming neck, she wore an icy blue necklace with half a pendant hanging from it. It looked very unique. On her beautiful face there were perfect facial features. Her thin lips were slightly pursed and her nose was straight. In her clear and deep eyes, there was an indifferent aura that came from her soul. This was a perfect body. Her proportions and facial features had reached the pinnacle of beauty. It was like the masterpiece of the creator. The people on the ancient viewing platform were the top geniuses of the 2 divine nations. They were all knowledgeable and outstanding. However, no one had ever seen such a perfect woman. Moreover, the white dress girl was not only as beautiful as a fairy, but also as calm as the moon and as calm as water. She just stood quietly in the sky. Her expression was calm as she looked down at the ancient viewing platform indifferently. However, there was an air of superiority, nobility, and holiness around her. It was an aura of nobility that came from the inside out, from the bones. It was as if she was an otherworldly fairy from the 9 heavens. She stood quietly in the clouds and looked down at the masses. The people even had an illusion that the white-dressed girl was not a god disciple of the Luoshui divine nation, but a fairy who had descended from the 9 heavens. Her beautiful face and noble aura made the young women present feel ashamed of their inferiority. Although the young women on the platform, including Jiang Ningxue, were all rare beauties. Compared to the white-dressed girl, they were like fireflies compared to the moon. They were not in the same world. The young men stared at the white-dressed girl with sparkling eyes. Their expressions were full of amazement, admiration, and admiration. They could not help but whisper to each other. In the crowd of the Heaven End Divine Nation, an elegant young man said with amazement, "How can there be such a perfect woman? She is like a fairy who has descended from the heavens." Another young man in a blue robe had a look of admiration. He praised sincerely, "In the entire continent, I'm afraid you won't find another woman who is as beautiful as her." The most powerful young man in a yellow robe said in a low voice, "If I can become cultivation partners with this woman, even if you ask me to leave the divine nation and join the Luoshui divine nation, I will not hesitate." The god disciples of the vast divine nation were also secretly discussing. Qin Songqiong, who was a man of few words, could not help but exclaim, "I've never seen such a perfect woman in my life. I'm afraid you won't see such a beauty in 1,000 years. We are lucky to be able to see her with our own eyes today." Song Zhanyu nodded his head in agreement. Yin Wuke had an envious look. He praised, "There are countless beauties in the world, but it's rare to see someone as beautiful as her. Moreover, she has an innate noble and holy aura. She is like a fairy from the 9 heavens. This is a miracle." Jiang Ningxue did not say anything. She pursed her lips and stared at the white-dressed girl. Her eyes were dim. Ji Tianxing was also silent. He looked at the white-dressed girl with a gentle look. "Yao Yao, you really came. We finally reunite on this continent." Chapter 1667. Without a doubt, the beautiful girl in the white dress was Yun Yao. She was not very interested in this kingdom exchange conference. She was only forced to participate because of the Divine Master's order. Therefore, her mood and expression were very indifferent. She did not take this matter and these people to heart. Even the geniuses on the ancient viewing platform were staring at her with shining eyes. They revealed expressions of surprise, admiration, and infatuation. She was also indifferent. Her heart did not waver. The middle-aged woman in the blue dress could not help but smile when she saw the reactions of the people on the platform. "Yun Yao, for the past year, you have been cultivating in seclusion. You rarely appear in front of everyone. I finally understand the reason. Every time you appear, you can amaze everyone. No matter if it's a man or a woman, they will be stunned." The middle-aged woman's expression was filled with gratification and pride. Yun Yao said indifferently, "Granny Long, you flatter me. In the secular world, appearance is the most important thing. Even the top geniuses of the various kingdoms are no exception. However, there is no place for one's soul. What's the use of having a perfect body?" Yin Yao sighed faintly. There was a hint of loneliness in her calm and indifferent words. The 2 young women behind her did not understand the meaning of her words. They said with complicated feelings, "Senior Sister Yin, aren't you too modest? Don't you see that those geniuses are all infatuated with you?" Sigh. "Senior Sister Yin, you think that beauty is useless, but we don't. If we can be as beautiful as you, we can make people go crazy wherever we go. We don't care about our souls or where to put them." Yin Yao did not reply. She also did not look back at her 2 junior sisters. Although she knew that her 2 junior sisters did not have any bad intentions, she did not want to discuss this matter. After all, they did not understand her past and experience. They would never understand her feelings and views. Granny Long glanced at her 2 junior sisters and used her eyes to signal them to shut up. Then she said, "Let's go. We will go down and greet them." As she said that, Granny Long led Yun Yao and the others to the ancient viewing platform. Yun Yao's eyes swept across everyone on the stage, but she did not stop. Suddenly, She caught sight of a familiar figure in the crowd from the vast divine nation. It was a handsome young man in a white robe. He had a refined temperament and was looking at her with gentle eyes. The moment their eyes met, Yin Yao's body stiffened, and her eyes flashed with disbelief. She stood rooted to the ground, unable to believe her eyes. Tianxing. Tianxing. He also came to this continent, and actually came here. Fortunately, Yin Yao had a telepathic connection with him. She was extremely familiar with his soul aura. If that wasn't the case, she would really suspect that the white-robed young man only looked like Ji Tianxing. After coming back to her senses, Yin Yao was overjoyed, and a faint smile flashed in her eyes. When Grandma Long saw her standing there in a daze, she looked puzzled and reminded her telepathically, "Yin Yao, what's wrong with you? Are you all right?" Yin Yao shook her head and replied with telepathic communication, "I'm fine." Grandma Long looked at her with a strange expression. She felt that something was wrong. However, the people from the vast divine nation and the heaven-in divine nation were staring at them. She could not tell Yin Yao the details. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Grandma Long and the 5 gods' disciples landed on the ancient viewing platform and greeted Guardian Yen and the Great Guardian. Guardian Yen, long time no see. Great Guardian, long time no see. Yin Yao and the other Luoshui gods' disciples also bowed to the 2 great guardians. Everyone greeted each other and exchanged greetings in a calm and indifferent manner. Ji Tianxing and Yin Yao stood in their respective groups and did not speak. The 2 of them looked at each other from a few hundred feet away. Their eyes were filled with relief and surprise, even though both of them were silent. However, silence spoke louder than words. Everything was conveyed without words. The 2 of them had a telepathic connection. There was no need for words. They could understand each other's thoughts and emotions with just a look. Not long after, everyone finished their greetings. Guardian Yen, the Great Guardian, and Grandma Long walked to the middle of the ancient viewing platform and stood under the black stone tablet. Guardian Yen was the first to speak. He said in a dignified tone, "All of you are the elite geniuses of each divine nation. You are all outstanding God's disciples who have gone through many rounds of selection. Today is the Divine Nation Exchange Conference that is held once every 20 years. Everyone is gathered here to share their martial arts experience and increase their knowledge and experience." Grandma Long continued, "The purpose of this conference is to exchange ideas and discuss. Everyone can express their opinions and talk freely. You can also have friendly discussions. The 3 of us old men will not interfere in the process of everyone's communication. However, please follow the rules and respect each other. Otherwise, we will have to intervene." The last one to speak was the Great Guardian. He looked around and said in a serious tone, "Everyone knows the rules. This conference will last for 1 day. I hope everyone will cherish this opportunity. If no one has any objections, this conference will start now." After that, the Great Guardian, Guardian Yen, and Grandma Long flew to the sky above the ancient viewing platform. The 3 of them sat in the clouds a few hundred feet above the ground and looked at the gods' disciples silently. The ancient viewing platform fell into silence. The gods' disciples from the 3 divine nations looked at each other and observed. No one stood out, and no one spoke. The atmosphere was a little awkward. After all, it was the first time the 15 gods' disciples had come here. They had no experience. Seeing this, Protector Yin frowned and said in a deep voice, "Since everyone is so reserved, then I'll give you a start. The 3 divine nations dominate the Xinwu continent. Although they use the common language, they have different environments, concepts, cultures, and so on. Huang Qi, introduce our Tianju divine nation to everyone." As Guardian Yin finished speaking, a young man in a yellow robe walked out from the 5 Tianju's disciples. His name was Huang Qi, and he was an 8th-level primordial spirit realm cultivator. He was the number 1 god's disciple from the Tianju divine nation. He was tall and sturdy, and his face was resolute. He exuded a confident and domineering aura. More than 10 gods' disciples immediately focused their attention on him. He calmly took 2 steps forward and said in a powerful tone, "Brothers, I am Huang Qi from the Tianju divine nation. I am the number 1 god's disciple. Everyone should know that among the three divine nations, our Tianju divine nation's strength and foundation is undeniably number one. The reason for this might be complicated, and there are many factors. However, in my opinion, the main reason lies in the two words, Tianju. As the saying goes, if the heavens want me dead, I will go against the heavens. The warriors of our Tianju divine nation have stubbornness and unwillingness to admit defeat in our bones. We will never give in or give in. Chapter 1668. The martial artists of Tianju God Nation have the qualities of stubbornness, courage, and tenacity. We are even more so when it comes to martial arts. Martial arts cultivation is like sailing against the current. If you don't advance, you will fall behind. The path to becoming an expert will never be smooth. It will be full of obstacles and dangers. However, only the brave and tenacious martial artists can overcome the storm. Huang Qi was very confident. His voice was deep and powerful, very infectious. He talked about the meaning of Tianju and explained the culture of Tianju God Nation and the concept of martial arts. He spoke clearly and logically. The dozens of God disciples listened attentively. Hearing some impassioned words, many of the God disciples nodded in agreement and showed an expression of approval. After Huang Qi finished talking about the spirit and beliefs of Tianju God Nation, he began to talk about the history of Tianju God Nation. He gave an example and mentioned martial god Tianju, one of the three god masters. It was said that martial god Tianju was born with blocked meridians when he was young. He was a good-for-nothing who could not cultivate martial arts. However, he had a different idea. With his strong willpower, he endured the inhumane torture and pain to refine his body. Later, martial god Tianju had another opportunity and received a mysterious martial arts legacy. He tempered his body to the extreme and became the first expert in the continent to reach the spirit cultivation realm without cultivating vital core. After stepping into the spirit cultivation realm, his martial arts path was smooth and his strength increased rapidly. In the end, he only used 1,000 years to become a martial god overlord. The miserable experience in his youth made martial god Tianju cold and ruthless. He worshipped martial arts and the law of the strong being respected. Therefore, after he established Tianju God Nation, he integrated his ideas into the God Nation and passed it on to all the people. Because of this, the martial arts culture of Tianju God Nation was very tough. The strong preyed on the weak and the survival of the fittest. Various forces were good at using iron and blood methods. Approximately 15 minutes later, Huang Qi was finally done with his speech. Taihao and the god disciples of Luoshui had a general understanding of the beliefs and customs of Tianju God Nation. Huang Qi bowed to the crowd and said, "Everyone, my words are just a start. I hope everyone will listen to me and communicate with each other." After saying that, he retreated into the crowd and looked at the many gods' disciples arrogantly. The god disciples of the Luoshui God Nation all looked at Yun Yao. Obviously, they hoped that Yun Yao would step forward. However, Yun Yao was indifferent. Her attention was not on this matter at all. Helpless, a young woman beside her could only take the initiative to step forward. "I am Yi Qingluo from the Luoshui Divine Kingdom." Their divine lord was the world-renowned Luoshui martial god. As we all know, the Luoshui martial god is the kindest and most benevolent, and our divine kingdom values friendliness and loyalty the most. It's because martial god Luoshui once inherited the will of the heavens and comprehended the true essence of being virtuous like water. Although Yi Qingluo was not the #1 god apostle of the Luoshui God Nation, nor was she the strongest, nor was she the most eloquent god apostle. However, when she talked about the Luoshui divine nation, she was in high spirits, and her thoughts were smooth and fluent. Her words were not as hot-blooded and sonorous as Huang Qi's, but they had a different meaning, causing everyone to listen quietly. Half an hour later, Yi Qingluo finished speaking. Everyone had a general understanding of the Luoshui divine nation's atmosphere, culture, and beliefs from her. Next, it was the vast divine nation's turn. Qin Songxiong, Song Zhanyu, and the others all looked at Ji Tianxing. However, Ji Tianxing stood where he was in silence. He had no intention of speaking at all. Not only that, he did not really listen to what Huang Qi and Yi Qingluo had said. He had read tens of thousands of books a long time ago, so he knew the three divine nations very well. Even if he did not listen to what Huang Qi and Yi Qingluo said, he knew the situation of the two divine nations. Song Jianyu saw that he was unwilling to speak, and was secretly delighted. He quickly took 2 steps forward and bowed to everyone. Brothers and sisters, I am Song Jianyu from the vast divine nation, ranked 3rd among the God Apostles. As everyone knows, the divine lord of the vast divine nation is the benevolent martial god Taihao. What is Taihao? The supreme Taishang, the boundless Haotian. The Taishang is all-encompassing and boundless, while Haotian is the embodiment of the people's hearts and morals. Therefore, martial god Taihao follows the will of the heavens and enlightens millions of people in the divine nation in the name of benevolence and righteousness. All this while Ji Tianxing had been in the limelight. He had suppressed the geniuses of the vast divine nation until they could not lift their heads. Now that Song Jianyu had finally seized the opportunity to be in the limelight, of course, he had to perform well. He spoke in a dignified tone about the philosophy and beliefs of the vast divine nation. He exuded a boundless aura of righteousness, as if he was representing the heavens and upholding righteousness for the people. His invisible influence made the God Apostles on the stage respect him. They nodded their heads and looked at him in a new light. Song Jianyu was encouraged and eloquently recounted the history of the vast divine nation, listing many incidents. After a full 15 minutes, he finished his narration. He bowed to everyone and returned to the crowd. Qin Songqiong nodded to him and said, "Very good." Song Jianyu let out a satisfied smile and thought to himself, Ji Tianxing is acting a little strange today. He doesn't dare to be arrogant anymore. If this is helping me. If there is a chance to perform, I will step forward bravely. It is said that the old man of the divine ruins will secretly observe. If I perform well enough, I will be favored by the old man of the divine ruins. When he thought of this, his heartbeat quickened. Next, a few more God Apostles stepped forward and expressed their opinions. The atmosphere on the ancient viewing platform became more and more lively. More than a dozen God Apostles expressed their opinions and showed the elegance of the top geniuses. In the sky, Guardian Yan, Granny Long, and the Great Guardian also smiled and nodded their heads in satisfaction. However, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao did not speak at all. Soon 4 hours had passed. Everyone was almost done discussing the history of the various divine nations. Thus the Great Guardian said, "Everyone, this is the end of the first round of discussion. Next, everyone can exchange their thoughts on martial arts and discuss their experiences and opinions on martial arts cultivation." When the Great Guardian's voice fell, Song Jianyu couldn't wait to stand up and salute everyone with cupped hands. Everyone knows that martial arts cultivation is a process of strengthening oneself and continuously learning about the heavens and earth. Everyone present is at the primordial soul realm and can already control the power of heaven and earth. A long time ago, I had an idea and inspiration in my heart, but I have not been able to realize it. Today, I will share this idea with all of you for discussion. Song Jianyu's words successfully piqued everyone's curiosity. Chapter 1669. Song Jianyu had successfully attracted everyone's attention, and he could not help but smile. He did not keep them in suspense, and told them his thoughts directly. Everyone has cultivated a territory, and many of them have mastered the 5 elements energy. They have integrated the 5 elements energy into their territories. Other than that, everyone's spiritual territory is similar. There is nothing new or different about it. Only a few experts and geniuses can integrate some formations and secret skills into their territories to increase the power and effect of their territories. Hearing Song Jianyu's words, the god's disciples could not help but nod their heads. That was the truth. Most of the god's disciples' territories had integrated the 5 elements energy. Only a few geniuses, like Ji Tianxing, were able to fuse special powers and sword formations into their domains. Seeing that everyone was curious, Song Jianyu said in a serious tone. My inspiration and idea is, can we make a more powerful transformation of our territories? For example, integrating our primordial spirit Dharma into our territories? Integrating the various secret skills that we have cultivated into our territories in the form of battle formations? I've looked through many ancient books and information. In the past few thousand years, almost no one has been able to do that. If we can succeed, it will be an unprecedented feat that will leave our names in history. Hearing this, the expressions of the god's disciples changed. They were all shocked. A few god's disciples shook their heads and denied Song Jianyu's idea. This idea is crazy. It can't be realized. That's right. Primordial spirit Dharma and spiritual territory are two completely different talents. How can they be integrated? When we reach the tribulation realm in the future, we will only retain our primordial spirit Dharma. Almost no one uses their spiritual territory. Why should we take the risk to transform it? That's right. The power and effect of spiritual territory are far inferior to primordial spirit Dharma. Amidst the crowd's discussion, Huang Qi stepped out of the crowd and said in a firm tone, Junior Brother Song's words do make sense. He's a person with a lot of ideas. Coincidentally, 10 years ago, I had a similar idea. Moreover, after tens of thousands of attempts and training, I've achieved some success. Hearing what Huang Qi said, everyone was shocked and looked at him in disbelief. Even Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's interest was piqued, and they turned to look at him. Huang Qi was the #1 god disciple of the Heaven End God Nation. He was also the first person to speak in this exchange. Therefore, everyone had a deep impression of him and paid close attention to him. Now that he opened his mouth, he suppressed Song Jianyu's limelight and won everyone's attention. Even though Song Jianyu was a little depressed, he couldn't help but admire Huang Qi. He asked, I wonder if senior apprentice brother Huang Qi can demonstrate your so-called in-progress success to everyone? Huang Qi glanced at him and smiled confidently. He nodded and said, Of course. Then I'll show my incompetence to everyone, so that we can exchange and discuss it together. After saying that, he formed a seal with both hands, and a powerful aura burst out from his body as he began to cast a secret technique. Shwa! A golden light shield with a radius of 1,000 feet appeared on the stage, fluctuating with a vigorous magic power aura. This golden light shield was Huang Qi's spiritual territory. Inside the light shield, there was a majestic power of the 5 elements flowing, and it lit up with a colorful brilliance. Other than that, in the 4 corners of the light shield, there were 4 gigantic array diagrams. Each diagram was complicated and was formed by a few array diagrams, and it looked extremely profound. Huang Qi stood on top of the golden light shield and said proudly, Everyone, please take a look. This is the spiritual territory that I've released using 20% of my power. I've practiced the flying moon sword skill before, and it has a total of 36 forms. It's very exquisite. I've spent 9 years, and with all my effort and wisdom, I've finally integrated the entire sword skill into the spiritual territory in the form of a sword array. Now that my spiritual territory has been modified, its power has increased by more than 2 times. After saying that, Huang Qi waved his hand to cast a spell, and the spiritual territory began to operate. Suddenly, hundreds of golden sword radiances burst out from the 4 profound array diagrams. Swoosh! More than 300 golden sword radiances danced in the light shield, sometimes forming a formation, sometimes condensing into one to perform an exquisite sword skill. More than 10 god disciples witnessed this scene with their own eyes, and they were all amazed and impressed. Even Guardian Yan, Great Guardian, and Grandmother Long, who were in the sky, looked pleased and nodded their heads in appreciation. Protector Yan, your country's Huang Qi is truly talented. Not only does he have ideas, but he also has great talent and perseverance. He's a good seedling that's worth nurturing. Without a doubt, Huang Qi's performance was very eye-catching, and many god disciples could not help but admire him. He smiled proudly and said playfully, Everyone, do you think that Junior Brother Song's guess is correct just because I've successfully integrated the secret skill with the territory? No, his guess is very bold, but it's only half right. The secret skill can be integrated with the territory, but the primordial spirit Dharma power definitely can't. And it's not necessary. This is the result that I've come to after tens of thousands of attempts. Huang Qi's tone was full of confidence and certainty. Song Zhanyu thought that Huang Qi was using his actions to support his point of view. However, he did not expect Huang Qi to reject his idea on the spot. This made him even more depressed. However, most of the god disciples who were present agreed with Huang Qi. Even if he wanted to refute, he had no confidence and no evidence. At this moment, Ji Tianxing, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke. Junior brother Huang Qi's words are too arbitrary. Even if you fail tens of thousands of times, it doesn't prove anything. Just because you can't do it doesn't mean that it won't work. The sudden voice silenced the crowd. More than a dozen god disciples were shocked and turned to look at Ji Tianxing. Huang Qi's smile disappeared, and he frowned as he looked at Ji Tianxing. He asked, Junior brother, may I know who you are? Ji Tianxing stepped out of the crowd and walked towards the golden light shield with an imposing manner. I'm Ji Tianxing, the #1 god disciple of the vast divine nation. Hearing his words, more than a dozen gods disciples frowned and started to discuss secretly. He's the #1 god disciple of the vast divine nation. He didn't even speak in the last round, right? This guy has been unknown all this time. I'm afraid we've misjudged him. What a shocking statement. I wonder if he can argue with Huang Qi? In an instant, the 14 god disciples all stared at Ji Tianxing. Everyone wanted to see what he was going to do. What right and confidence did he have to refute Huang Qi in public? Yin Yao did not speak. Her eyes were filled with anticipation as she stared at Ji Tianxing. Chapter 1670. Huang Qi frowned and looked at Ji Tianxing with a deep gaze. Before this, he had not noticed Ji Tianxing. In the first round of discussion, 3 god disciples from the vast divine nation had spoken, but Ji Tianxing had remained silent. Huang Qi naturally ignored Ji Tianxing. However, after carefully observing Ji Tianxing, he realized that Ji Tianxing had the strength of an 8th-level primordial soul realm cultivator, and his aura was extraordinary. Huang Qi's mood and gaze turned solemn. Before Ji Tianxing appeared, his performance was the most outstanding. He was the center of attention, and many god disciples agreed with him and admired him. However, Ji Tianxing stepped forward and said something shocking. It was as if he was going against Huang Qi. Huang Qi's halo was immediately suppressed. Everyone's attention shifted to Ji Tianxing. However, Ji Tianxing's strength was extraordinary, and he was the top god disciple of the vast divine nation. Huang Qi felt the pressure and saw Ji Tianxing as a strong opponent. He asked, Junior brother Ji, from what you said, you seem to disagree with my point of view. Do you have any good ideas? Or are you able to integrate the secret skill and primordial soul Dharma form into the territory? Ji Tianxing walked to the golden light shield and stopped. He said confidently, You will know later whether I can do it or not. However, what I want to say is that you integrated the sword technique into the territory and increased the power of the territory by more than 2 times. It seems very successful. Your idea is good. But there are some problems with the way you integrated the secret skill, and there are a few flaws. Huang Qi frowned when he heard that. He was displeased. Not only did Ji Tianxing steal his limelight, but he also pointed out his flaws in front of everyone. This made him feel rather embarrassed, and he felt somewhat embarrassed. The god disciples from the various nations had agreed and admired him just now. However, after Ji Tianxing's reminder, everyone was a little shaken and decided to wait and see. Huang Qi looked at Ji Tianxing solemnly and said in a low voice, Junior brother Ji, I've studied it for 9 years and tried tens of thousands of times before I managed to merge the secret skill and territory to this extent. Since you think there's a flaw, then please show me the evidence, not just empty words. Although we're exchanging our experiences in martial arts, we're not talking without thinking. We have to have substance to convince people, don't we? Ji Tianxing nodded and said with a smile, You want evidence? It's too simple. I can verify it for everyone right now. As soon as he finished speaking, He silently circulated his magic power and slowly raised his right hand. A dazzling golden light gushed out from his 5 fingers. Junior brother Huang Qi used 20% of his power to create this spiritual domain. My strength is about the same as his, being at the 8th firmament essence soul realm. Then, I can also use 20% of my strength to destroy this domain. Hearing his words, Huang Qi was stunned, and a hint of a smile flashed through his eyes. Junior brother Ji, aren't you overconfident? More than 10 gods' disciples from the 3 countries looked interested as they stared at Ji Tianxing. Everyone wanted to see if Ji Tianxing could destroy Huang Qi's spiritual domain. If he couldn't, then it would prove that what he said earlier was just empty talk without any basis. He would be humiliated and become a laughing stock. On the other hand, if he could destroy Huang Qi's spiritual domain, it would prove that what he said made sense. At the thought of this, the gods' disciples were filled with anticipation. Even Guardian Yan, Granny Long, and the Great Guardian in the sky were paying close attention to Ji Tianxing. Under everyone's gaze, Ji Tianxing formed a sword with his right hand and drew a mysterious trajectory. At lightning speed, 9 golden sword rays shot out. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Each sword ray was 10 feet long. They were dazzling and contained an indestructible power. The 9 sword rays pierced towards different parts of the light shield. They were the flaws that Ji Tianxing had mentioned. Bang! 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 In the next moment, a series of loud noises exploded and reverberated around the ancient viewing platform. The golden sword light completely shattered, turning into a sky full of golden light fragments, bursting out in all directions. 5 holes appeared in the spiritual domain light shield that was 100 feet wide. Dense cracks appeared on it. With a crisp gotcha sound, the entire light shield was torn apart and disintegrated on the spot. Huang Qi's face turned pale when he saw that. He widened his eyes in disbelief and stared at Ji Tianxing. His body stiffened, and he stood rooted to the ground. Even though he had seen it with his own eyes, he could not accept this result. The improved spiritual domain that he was most proud of had been easily destroyed by Ji Tianxing. This was unbelievable. More than 10 gods' disciples from the 3 countries were shocked and looked at Ji Tianxing in amazement. After a few seconds of silence, the crowd started to discuss in low voices. Ji Tianxing really did it. This is unbelievable. Yi Qingluo from the Luoshui Holy Kingdom stared at Ji Tianxing with burning eyes and exclaimed, "If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it." A young man beside her nodded in agreement and said, "Huang Qi's spiritual domain has been improved, and its power has been increased by more than 2 times. Ji Tianxing can destroy it so easily. This is enough to prove that the 5 places that Ji Tianxing attacked were the flaws and loopholes of the spiritual domain." The 4 gods' disciples from the Heaven and Holy Kingdom had complicated expressions and were discussing in low voices. How could this be? Could it be that senior brother Huang Qi's spiritual domain really has a few flaws? Ji Tianxing's strength is not inferior to senior brother Huang Qi's. He is a strong opponent for senior brother Huang Qi. The glory and limelight that senior brother Huang Qi obtained with great difficulty has been stolen by Ji Tianxing. Not only were the gods' disciples shocked, but they were also discussing. Even the 3 martial sages in the sky looked at each other and discussed secretly through voice transmission. Granny Long looked at Ji Tianxing with admiration and said, "I didn't expect this inconspicuous kid to have such strength and knowledge. He is not simple." Guardian Yin frowned slightly and said in a playful tone, "Great Guardian, the #1 god's disciple in your country is really amazing." The Great Guardian stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Guardian Yin, I am not boasting, but Ji Tianxing is not an ordinary genius. He is a demon that only appears once in 1,000 years. Compared to the miracles that he has created in the past, this is not worth discussing." Of course, Guardian Yin did not believe him. However, he could not refute him, and could only remain silent. On the other hand, Granny Long's interest was piqued by the Great Guardian's words, and she paid more attention to Ji Tianxing. At this moment, Huang Qi came back to his senses. He calmed himself down and looked at Ji Tianxing coldly. He said in a low voice, Junior brother G's strength is indeed extraordinary. It is admirable. You have broken my spiritual domain, which proves that my spiritual domain is not perfect, and there is still room for improvement. I am grateful for that. However, you have to prove that you can integrate the secret skill and primordial spirit Dharma power into your spiritual domain. Only then can you refute my words and opinions. Chapter 1671. Huang Qi was very smart. As the number one God's disciple of Heaven in God Nation, his martial arts talent and intelligence were top-notch. Even if he was humiliated in front of everyone, he could still keep calm and seize the key point to counterattack Ji Tianxing. So what if Ji Tianxing broke his realm? This only proved that his realm was not perfect and still needed to be improved. His previous statements and views could not be denied or overturned. When Huang Qi's voice rang out and spread across the ancient viewing platform, everyone quieted down. Everyone's eyes were focused on Huang Qi and Ji Tianxing, waiting for a good show. In everyone's eyes, Ji Tianxing and Huang Qi were the two most powerful geniuses. The exchange, debate and sparring between them would definitely be the most exciting. Ji Tianxing stood in the middle of the ancient viewing platform and nodded calmly. I have my reasons for refuting your opinion. I'll now try to see if I can integrate my primordial spirit Dharma power and Dharma power into my realm. As for whether the result will disappoint everyone, I don't know yet. Hearing his words, Huang Qi and the god's disciples had strange expressions on their faces. What? You're trying now? Huang Qi frowned and smiled. Junior brother Ji, aren't you making fun of everyone and wasting your time? The god's disciples from various countries shook their heads, expressing that they did not understand and secretly laughed. Huang Qi spent 9 years and tried tens of thousands of times to integrate his Dharma power into his realm. Ji Tianxing is trying to integrate his Dharma power and primordial spirit Dharma power into his realm? Yi Qingluo looked at Ji Tianxing with a strange expression and secretly shook her head. She did not believe it at all. The young god's disciple beside her said confidently, "This is ridiculous. Ji Tianxing will never succeed. Even the number one genius, since ancient times, wouldn't be able to do it." The god's disciples from Heaven in God Nation whispered to each other and shook their heads as they sneered. Senior brother Huang Qi has tried tens of thousands of times and still could not integrate his primordial spirit Dharma power. Ji Tianxing still wants to experiment on the spot? This is simply wishful thinking, a fool's dream. Now it seems that Ji Tianxing's skill is limited to this. He purposely said that it was a last-minute attempt to find an excuse for his impending failure. I thought that he was so confident because he was prepared. I did not expect. Qin Songqiong and Song Zhanyu of Heaven Vast God Nation were also discussing. Qin Songqiong shook his head and said expressionlessly, Ji Tianxing will definitely fail. This is too childish. Song Zhanyu smiled and said, just now, I still thought that he could suppress Huang Qi and win honor for Scandinavia. Now it seems that he's about to make a fool of himself in front of everyone and disgrace Scandinavia. You really are measuring the heart of a gentleman with your own mean measure. In Wuxia scolded. At this moment, Ji Tianxing finally cast the spell, after a period of contemplation and preparation. He waved both of his palms, unleashing an earth-shattering golden light that scattered on the ancient gazing platform. Shwa! In the blink of an eye, a golden light barrier with a radius of 400 zhang appeared above the ancient gazing platform. This was his divine lightning sword domain. The dark golden light shield was filled with strands of purple lightning. Billions of electric arcs were flowing around it. The light shield exuded a majestic aura that was as heavy as a mountain, as if it could suppress the world. The god disciples could clearly sense the power of the realm, and they were all shocked. This is Ji Tianxing's domain? It's actually the same as Huang Qi. It's also a golden domain, but it's about 4 times bigger. If Ji Tianxing also used 20% of his power, then wouldn't his power be 4 times stronger than Huang Qi's? That's impossible, right? He and Huang Qi are both in the 8th level of the primordial spirit realm. The difference shouldn't be that big. A blue-robed youth from the Heaven and Divine Nation suddenly frowned and exclaimed, Ji Tianxing's realm has the power of lightning? Hearing this, everyone's attention was immediately focused on the dark golden light shield, staring at the dense lightning arcs. Instantly, more than 10 gods' disciples were shocked and exclaimed in surprise. It's the power of lightning. This is unbelievable. Only martial lords who have gone through a few tribulations can control the power of lightning. Ji Tianxing is only in the 8th level of the primordial spirit realm, but he can control lightning? Not only can he control lightning, but he can also merge it into his realm. How powerful! Other than tribulation realm experts, no one can resist the power of lightning. How did Ji Tianxing refine the lightning? The god disciples from the Heaven In Divine Nation and Luoshui Divine Nation were all shocked. Qin Songxiong, Song Zhanyu, Yin Wuk, Jiang Ningxue, and the others had already seen Ji Tianxing's monstrous means, so they were not surprised. Besides them, Yin Yao was also very calm. She looked at Ji Tianxing gently with a faint smile in her eyes. At the same time, Ji Tianxing pointed at the divine lightning sword realm and said calmly, "This is the divine lightning sword realm that I have used 20% of my power. I have already merged the power of lightning and a few sword formations into the realm." Everyone looked inside the realm and saw that there were indeed thousands of sword lights on the dark golden light wall, which contained the profoundness of the formation. Next, I will merge my primordial spirit Dharma idol into the realm. As Ji Tianxing spoke, he activated his primordial spirit Dharma idol, and his body lit up with a golden light. Under everyone's gaze, a dazzling golden sword that was 1,000 feet tall appeared above his head. Swoosh! The ancient golden sword emitted a destructive aura, as well as a divine and majestic power as it floated in the air. When everyone saw this, they were shocked and started to discuss. This is Ji Tianxing's primordial spirit Dharma idol? Why is it a giant sword? This is strange. I have seen thousands of primordial spirit Dharma idols, including giants, beasts, and even deities, but I have never seen a giant sword Dharma idol. It seems like Ji Tianxing is an expert in the way of the sword. His sword skills must be superb. Such a special primordial spirit Dharma idol is rare. I wonder if he can merge it into the realm. As everyone was discussing, Ji Tianxing started to cast a spell and controlled the primordial spirit golden sword to enter the realm. Swoosh! Under his precise control, the giant primordial spirit golden sword split into tens of thousands of golden swords and merged into the dark golden light shield. The tens of thousands of golden swords flew smoothly in the light shield without any delay. Chapter 1672. Ji Tianxing stood calmly in the sky without any signs of discomfort. After the divine lightning sword realm merged with the primordial spirit golden sword, there was nothing wrong with it, and its power had increased by 4 times. An even more majestic aura emanated from the sword realm and enveloped the entire ancient viewing platform. At that moment, the gods' disciples from the 3 holy kingdoms stared at Su Mo in disbelief. Especially Huang Qi, who stared at Su Mo with his mouth agape. He had studied it for a few years and had tried it tens of thousands of times. He knew that it was impossible. How could the primordial spirit Dharma body and the spiritual realm merge together? It was absolutely illogical. However, Ji Tianxing had done it, and he had done it so effortlessly. How could he believe it? How could he accept such an outcome? The 3 martial sages in the sky were also surprised, and they could not help but exclaim. Granny Long was full of praise and she nodded her head. Good! Great Guardian, you were right. This kid can really create miracles. This is wonderful. The Great Guardian smiled and stroked his beard. He looked pleased and said, Actually, I have tried to merge the primordial spirit Dharma body into the spiritual realm, but I failed. I did not expect Ji Tianxing to be able to do it. This is definitely a miracle. I can't believe that this kid can really do it. Guardian Yin sighed with a complicated tone, and a look of disappointment flashed across his eyes. Ji Tianxing's success had won everyone's admiration. He was extremely glorious and had a halo around him. He had completely overshadowed Huang Qi's glory, and he had used his actions to prove that Huang Qi's words were laughable. How could Protector Yin be happy? On the ancient viewing platform, the god's disciples were shocked, and they were discussing excitedly. Wuxia was the most excited, and he was cheering happily. He even took the lead to clap for Ji Tianxing. Under his lead, a few god's disciples also clapped and praised Ji Tianxing. All along, the martial world had thought that the spiritual realm and the primordial spirit Dharma body were two different things, and they could not be merged. Today, Ji Tianxing has succeeded. He created a miracle. The greatest surprise and reward of this year's exchange is that Ji Tianxing has verified something and solved an eternal mystery. That's right. Reality has proven that primordial spirit Dharma idol and divine soul domain can be fused. It's just that most people can't do it. It is our honor to be able to witness the birth of this miracle with our own eyes. The discussions and praises of the crowd continued to resound on the ancient gazing platform. Yun Yao stood quietly in the crowd and gazed at Ji Tianxing with a smile on her face. Her heart was filled with gratification and pride. A star will always shine. Whether it's in the Tianxian continent or in the Xinwu continent where powerhouses gather, Tianxing will always be the most dazzling star. After not seeing him for a year, not only had his strength advanced by leaps and bounds, his temperament, wisdom, and bearing had undergone a complete transformation as well. He'd already grown into a true peerless expert. Throughout the entire Xinwu continent, even the top geniuses of the three divine kingdoms were gathered here. But they were all overshadowed by his aura and drowned out by his radiance. This is my husband. These thoughts flashed through Yin Yao's mind, and only happiness and contentment remained in her heart. However, just as the crowd was cheering and discussing, Huang Qi spoke up once again. He was still unwilling to admit defeat, and he spoke in a solemn tone. Junior brother Ji, you've created a miracle today, and it's truly admirable. However, you were clearly prepared for this. You must have spent many years and tried countless times before you succeeded in fusing your primordial spirit Dharma idol. You actually claimed that this was your first attempt. Isn't that a little dishonest? Ji Tianxing glanced at him and revealed a playful smile. I already said that this was my first attempt. It doesn't matter if you believe me or not. Just because you can't do it doesn't mean that others can't. There's always someone better than you. The wonders of the martial path and the vastness of the world far exceed your knowledge and imagination. If he had said these words before, it would have been like an elder educating a junior, and no one would have believed him. But now, when the crowd heard his words, they deeply agreed with him, and many of them secretly nodded. Huang Qi's aura was completely suppressed by Ji Tianxing. He frowned and continued. All right, we'll take it that this is your first attempt. However, it's still unknown whether your primordial spirit Dharma idol can fuse smoothly with the territory. You've tested my territory just now, and now I'll test yours. This is only fair, isn't it? Although the crowd felt that it was inappropriate, they were whispering among themselves. Many of them felt that Huang Qi was pestering Ji Tianxing because he was unwilling to admit defeat. To them, it was already a miracle that Ji Tianxing could successfully fuse his primordial spirit Dharma idol and territory on his first attempt. Without going through many trials and fusing, his territory would definitely be unstable, and it would be easily defeated. Huang Qi's actions were not straightforward enough, and the god's disciples were somewhat disappointed. However, Huang Qi's words were reasonable, and no one could refute him. More than 10 god's disciples and 3 martial sages looked at Ji Tianxing silently, waiting for his reply and reaction. Ji Tianxing showed an indifferent expression and nodded. Of course it's fair, but I have a request. Seeing that Ji Tianxing had agreed, Huang Qi smiled and said, You don't have to say much. I'll only use 20% of my strength, and I won't take advantage of you. Ji Tianxing shook his head and said calmly, Even if you use all your strength, you won't be able to break my territory, let alone 20% of your strength. My request is that after you've tested my territory, you can change the way you address me. With your strength, you should address me as Senior Brother Ji. There was an unwritten rule in the martial arts world that people of the same generation would address each other based on their strength. After all, many experts had lived for hundreds of years, and it would be too troublesome to address each other based on their age. Ji Tianqing's intention was straightforward. He wanted Huang Qi to admit that he was more powerful than Ji Tianqing. Huang Qi frowned and anger flashed across his eyes. Junior brother Ji, you want me to address you as senior brother? That depends on whether you're qualified or not. If your territory is strong enough, then I'll have nothing to say. If your territory can't withstand a single blow, then it proves that your point is just an armchair strategist. After saying that, he did not give Ji Tianqing any chance to speak. He raised his right palm at lightning speed and slapped towards the Divine Thundersword territory. A giant golden palm the size of a house appeared, and with an extremely powerful destructive force, it slammed onto the dark golden light shield. Bang! With a deafening explosion, the giant golden palm was shattered into pieces. On the other hand, the dark golden light barrier was completely undamaged. Hundreds of purple lightning arcs erupted from it and blasted towards Huang Qi's head. Bang bang bang. Chapter 1673. Hundreds of lightning arcs wrapped around Huang Qi's body, crackling and flashing. His face was covered in dust, and his hair was messy. He was in a sorry state. His dark face was filled with shock, and his eyes were wide open, revealing a look of shock. On the ancient gazing platform it was quiet. The god's disciples were shocked as they stared at Huang Qi. After a while, the crowd came back to their senses and started to discuss. Some of them even exclaimed, I didn't expect Ji Tianqing's realm to be unscathed. The facts have proven that Ji Tianqing has succeeded. His realm has merged with his primordial spirit and Dharma power. Sigh. Huang Qi should have just admitted defeat. Why did he have to make such a scene and end up in such a sorry state? Huang Qi's face was cloudy, and his eyes were complicated. He stood up slowly and walked towards Ji Tianqing. Although he had failed, his temperament was steady and resolute. He wouldn't feel too much of a sense of defeat, let alone get angry because of it. A man should know when to yield and when to stand tall. He had decided to admit defeat. However, Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said, I've said that 20% of your strength is not enough. Even if you use all your strength, you won't be able to break my realm. Huang Qi raised his head. An array of light flashed in his eyes. Hope was rekindled in his heart. All right, that's what you said. He was confident that if he used all his strength, he would be able to break Ji Tianqing's realm. In that case, he would be able to save some face and steal Ji Tianqing's limelight. In a flash, he flew up to the sky and arrived above the Divine Thundersword realm. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he took out a black sword and held it firmly with both hands. An earth-shattering aura of Dharma power surged out from his body. He silently accumulated his Dharma power, and his combat strength increased rapidly. Soon he had reached his peak. He wanted to use his strongest strength and the most powerful attack secret skill to break the Divine Thundersword realm with one strike. More than 10 gods' disciples could feel Huang Qi's terrifying strength. Their faces turned solemn as they stared at him without blinking. Everyone had to admit that Huang Qi was indeed the #1 genius of heaven and divine nation. His combat strength was terrifyingly strong. However, Ji Tianqing's performance was even more monstrous, and he was very confident and domineering. Everyone was filled with anticipation and couldn't wait to see the results. In the next moment, Huang Qi's aura rose to its peak. He let out a low growl and slashed with his sword with all his might. Sword slaughters the heavenly dragon. He held the sword with both hands and used all his strength to slash out a huge dark golden sword, which fell from the sky towards the Divine Thunder Sword domain. The power of this sword was enough to split mountains and sever rivers and mountain ranges. Even the legendary heavenly dragon would be cut into two by the giant sword. Its power was terrifying to the extreme. The dazzling golden light illuminated the sky for dozens of kilometers, as if a bolt of golden lightning had streaked across the horizon. The fierce and violent sword qi swept across the entire ancient viewing platform, shocking many god disciples. Everyone's hearts were in their throats. They were extremely nervous. Could Ji Tianqing's domain withstand the power of this sword? Boom! The 300-meter-long dark golden greatsword struck the divine thunder sword domain, causing an earth-shattering boom to erupt. Suddenly, the huge sword shattered into thousands of pieces and scattered in the sky. The dark golden divine thunder sword domain also vibrated violently, creating layers of ripples. However, the light shield was still intact. There wasn't even a crack on it. The violent rebounding force, wrapped in thousands of lightning arcs, struck towards Huang Qi. Bam! Huang Qi was drowned by the purple lightning. He was sent flying high into the sky, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this scene, everyone's faces were filled with shock as they let out a series of exclamations. No one would have thought that Huang Qi could not break Ji Tianxing's domain, even though he had used all his strength with his ultimate move. However, he was sent flying by the power of the domain. He was injured on the spot and ended up in a pathetic state. This was unbelievable. The truth was that Ji Tianxing's true strength was several times stronger than Huang Qi's. In the sky, Guardian Yan's expression changed. He looked extremely worried. He waved his hand and swept away the lightning arcs that surrounded Huang Qi. He then grabbed Huang Qi in his huge green palm. After the lightning dissipated, Huang Qi's figure appeared. The yellow robe he wore was already charred black and tattered, his clothes tattered and ragged. Under his disheveled hair was a charred face. There were still traces of blood at the corner of his mouth. He was heavily injured. However, he was not unconscious. He was still conscious, but his breathing was a little chaotic. Guardian Yan's face was tense. He released a vast green dermic power and injected it into Huang Qi's body. After a short 10 breaths, Huang Qi's breathing stabilized. His injuries were also much better. Then a golden light flashed on his body. The charred and tattered yellow robe disappeared and was replaced by a clean and tidy robe. He tidied up his messy hair and cast a spell to remove the black scars on his face. Soon he was back to normal. Thank you, Guardian Yan. Huang Qi bowed to Protector Yan and expressed his thanks. Then, he flew back to the ancient viewing platform and walked to Ji Tianxing with a cold expression. Senior brother Ji, I accept my defeat wholeheartedly. Huang Qi fulfilled his promise. After he finished speaking, he turned around and left expressionlessly. He returned to the crowd of Heaven and God Nation. Even though he had been defeated, and even suffered heavy injuries, he was in a very sorry state. However, he didn't get angry, nor did he speak ill of Ji Tianxing. He still maintained the demeanor of a genius expert. As a result, the god's disciples from various countries had a better impression of him. Of course, everyone's attention was on Ji Tianxing. At this moment, Ji Tianxing became the focus of everyone. The god's disciples from various countries were filled with respect and admiration for him. He had created a miracle in front of everyone and used his strength to prove himself. Of course, he would win everyone's respect and admiration. Several young women were looking at him with a strange look in their eyes. Their eyes were sparkling. However, he ignored everyone's strange looks. He quietly withdrew his primordial spirit golden sword and removed the divine thunder sword realm. Then, he walked back to the crowd with a calm expression. From the beginning to the end, he was calm and indifferent. There was no arrogance or pride on his face. It was as if his performance just now was a trivial matter. It was as simple as eating and drinking. This made everyone admire him more and more. They felt that he was unfathomable. The ancient viewing platform quieted down temporarily. Many gods' disciples were paying attention to Ji Tianxing and secretly discussing with each other through voice transmission. The great guardian in the sky saw that the atmosphere was a little awkward. He took the initiative to speak. Everyone, the second round of the martial arts exchange just now was wonderful. It was an eye-opener for us. Huang Qi and Ji Tianxing were both rare martial arts geniuses in this world. The exchange and learning between the top geniuses benefited everyone a lot. It also allowed everyone to witness the birth of a miracle. No matter what the result is, everyone should be grateful to them. Next, the last round of the exchange will begin. Let me ask everyone, what is the sky? Chapter 1674. Initially, everyone was still immersed in their excitement. More than 10 god disciples were still discussing the battle between Ji Tianxing and Huang Qi. The miracle that Ji Tianqing had created, as well as his valiant strength, caused everyone to exclaim in admiration. Hearing the great guardian's words, everyone's attention was attracted, and they were immediately interested. More than a dozen God's disciples stopped their discussion and frowned as they pondered. The ancient viewing platform was silent for a few minutes. Many people quietly looked at Ji Tianqing, thinking that he would be the first to perform. After all, he had been in the limelight just now and his demonic performance had suppressed everyone. As long as he opened his mouth to speak, he would definitely be able to subdue the God disciples present with his previous power. However, Ji Tianqing stood there thoughtfully and had no intention of performing. Therefore, some God disciples could not wait any longer. This was the last round of the competition. If they did not perform well, they would not be able to make a name for themselves, and would not be able to attract the attention of the old man of the ruins. A young man in a blue robe walked out from Tianzhu God Nation. He was the second God disciple of Tianzhu God Nation, and his strength was second only to Huang Qi. He walked steadily to the middle of the ancient viewing platform and stood there. After looking around, he said in a serious tone, "I'm Meng Fei, the second God disciple of Tianzhu God Nation. I'm not talented, and my martial arts realm and strength are not as good as Huang Qi and senior brother Ji. However, I've been reading books since I was young, and I especially like to study ancient books. I've read more than 1,000,000 books in my life. I have my own views on the topic of what heaven is, and I'd like to share them with everyone for discussion." Hearing Meng Fei's words, the God's disciples were shocked, and they were secretly amazed. 1,000,000 books piled up together was enough to build a palace. Meng Fei had actually read so many books. It was truly shocking, and left people speechless. Under everyone's amazed and admiring gazes, Meng Fei said confidently, "What is heaven? Since ancient times, there have been many ancient idioms in the martial arts world. Go against heaven, heaven's will is hard to go against, change the world, and so on." These idioms had a common characteristic, which was that they contained the meaning of restraint and restraint. Heaven meant the supreme power and law that ruled all races and living beings in the world. No matter what race it was, whether it was living creatures or plants, they were all bound by the heavens and obeyed the heavenly Tao. Therefore, I believe that heaven is an invisible shackle, a powerful restraint and shackle. As for us martial artists, if we want to continuously become stronger, experience a wider world, and reach a higher realm, we have to go against the heavens and face difficulties head-on. Only by breaking through layer after layer of shackles can one be transformed. Meng Fei's words and opinions had their own uniqueness, and they were clear and logical. It contained a strong heaven-end style, which coincided with the philosophy and martial arts atmosphere of the heaven-end divine nation. Some of the disciples of God from various countries agreed with his point of view and listened attentively. However, there were also people who disagreed with his point of view. Soon 15 minutes passed. After Meng Fei finished explaining his point of view, he cupped his hands and bowed to the crowd before retreating. Shortly after, Yi Qingluo of the Luo River Divine Country walked to the center of the ancient gazing platform. She was tall and had a valiant aura about her. "I am Yi Qingluo, and I have some different views on this sacred issue. Everyone please listen to me. In my opinion, heaven is not an invisible rule and shackle, but a belief that exists in everyone's heart, or rather an idea. The ancients said that heaven is virtuous, but I think that virtuous people do not go to heaven, but rather, it is what people yearn for. There are many similar sayings, such as the great harmony of the world, compassion for the state of the universe, earth-shattering. In fact, heaven is an illusory existence. How can it have all kinds of emotions and desires? We have all these emotions within ourselves. We have kindness in our hearts, yearn for beauty, and desire more power. Therefore we entrust this idea and belief to heaven." Yi Qingluo's words were reasonable, and the disciples of God from the Luo River Divine Nation agreed with her. Even the disciples of God from the other two divine nations thought about it carefully and felt that it made sense. 15 minutes later, after Yi Qingluo finished speaking, Jiang Ningxue went up the platform again. She also expressed her own thoughts and opinions. which were also approved by the disciples of God. Next, Song Zhanyu, Huang Qi, and a few other disciples of God went up the platform one by one and expressed their own opinions. Everyone expressed their own opinions, from different angles, and used different ways of thinking to interpret heaven in their hearts. Only Ji Tianxing looked indifferent, quietly pondering, and did not show any signs of speaking. The three martial saints in the sky glanced at him from time to time, secretly hoping that he would speak. After all, he was a dazzling genius with his own thoughts and unique views. If he was willing to speak, it would definitely be unique. At the same time, 100 miles north of the ancient viewing platform, in the gray sky, there was an invisible black figure standing quietly in the thick clouds. This figure was tall and burly, shrouded in a wide black robe. Judging from the figure, this person was a man who was 2 meters tall. The wide sleeves of the robe hung by his side, revealing a pair of wide yellow palms, and his skin was as old as tree bark. Obviously, this black-robed man was an elder. The black-robed elder stood silently in the sky, his body covered by the black robe, and his face was also covered by a wide cloak. No one noticed him, and no one could see his true face. Even the three martial saints in the sky above the ancient viewing platform could not detect his existence. But in fact, he had already appeared here, since the beginning of the Kingdom of God's exchange meeting. He was like an illusory shadow, but also like a god who had merged with heaven and earth, breathing and sharing the same fate. He was the legendary old man of the divine ruins, the guardian of the ancient divine ruins. Although the old man of the divine ruins looked in the direction of the ancient viewing platform, he seemed to be watching the situation there. But in fact, the old face under the cloak was expressionless. His eyes were tightly shut, and he had never opened them. With his vast divine consciousness, which encompassed heaven and earth, he sensed everything on the ancient viewing platform and listened to everyone's voice. Since the beginning of the Kingdom of God's exchange meeting, he knew everything that had happened on the platform and what everyone had said. In the first round of exchange, many disciples of God expressed their opinions, describing the local customs and martial arts concepts of each country. The old man of the divine ruins listened quietly, without any reaction, and did not open his eyes. In the second round of exchange, Ji Tianxing and Huang Qi went head-to-head, debating and exchanging pointers in public. Ji Tianxing even created a miracle and used his strength to prove himself, shocking everyone. The old man of the divine ruins listened quietly, his expression unchanged, and his eyes were tightly shut. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.